Okay, I don't know why there's two musics happening. I can't find the other one. You know when you have like a bunch of browser tabs and you're like, which one is playing music? It's kind of like that.
Oh, oh shit! I need to post on Instagram that we're here. Hello everyone. Oh, hey Eric. Hope you had a good time at AWP. Looks like you bought accumulated a lot of books. Hopefully you had a good time.
Jen Laham. No, we appreciate the. I have never seen that before. Milestone achieved. Jen Laham watched 3 consecutive streams this month, sparked a watch streak. No, if other people want to share the
Oh,
whatever that I've never seen that before. If anyone else wants to share their milestones, go for it.
their achievements in this pyramid scheme called internet.
Ours specifically.
Yes, our internet. Won a full ride to a conference that I ended up not being able to go to. Well,
Ah,
rip.
F in the
Damn,
chat. F in the chat for
that
Eric.
sucks.
Yeah,
Sorry, everyone. Just posting.
yeah. I don't know why there's double music. I mean I know why. It's because I haven't taken the right one out. But it's only it's like not showing. Oh, you know what I must have done is I must have hidden it. That's
Oh,
what I did.
hidden the source.
Yeah. Okay. I will have to try to remember that for later. Oh, speaking of which, I'm going to start recording this, even though we'll have missed a little bit. I think we're okay. Shape to defy.
Appreciate it. We love robots here, but
Yeah.
only up to a certain point.
I'm doing good. I have a microphone arm that is supposed to come today, so I'm very excited.
She's
Uh,
about to be Rogan pilled, everybody.
I'm already Rogan filled.
It's on the record.
I have never actually watched or watched or listened to Joe Rogan in my life. I
I'm
know.
telling you that 4 hour Jordan Peterson interview.
Oh God. Uh,
Sorry, I interrupted you. I think you were about to say like
oh no,
what you know of him.
I was just gonna say I've watched clips and stuff and seen that stupid face Elon Musk made when he was smoking weed that one time a million times, but I
The
don't know.
blood hits.
He always seemed like a turf.
Yo, yeah.
Eric,
Ooh,
nice.
got
Seeing the cure.
tick for the cure. That's amazing. I didn't know that they like toured like that. I mean, I know other than doing that Gorillas collab like 2 years ago, I didn't know they really were like getting out of the house. They don't. Oh, okay. This is a rare treat then,
That's exciting.
especially in the US, I would assume. That's awesome. Wow.
Are they British? I don't know that. You'd think I would know about the cure looking at me, but I'm a fake goth girl. I don't know about the
Oh, do
cure.
you not listen to like goth music
I
or
I appreciate it and I like it every time I listen to it, but I don't I'm definitely like the more gothy thing that I like actually listen to is more industrial. Which
mm.
I don't even listen to a lot of industrial actually these days. So I'm a little bit of a fake goth girl. I'm sorry to everybody who I've
Yeah.
hurt.
Sorry to the community for misrepresenting my ties to the culture. No, I'm the same way that I'm like normie industrial and not even, for me, it's like I really need it to be, the Muzak of industrial, like
Mm-hmm.
Trent Reznor when he sings good, like
Not even when he sings bad, only when he sings
not
good.
only when he sings good and when he's making like gentle lullabies for the social network and things like that. So
Is the Cure the one that
he's got the hair.
is he a piece of shit? Or is that a different
No,
one? Or is that all I
that's
mean
um that's the fake asexual one who's not actually asexual or whatever. Somebody else in the chat will know what I'm talking about. Morrissey.
Morrissey, okay.
Yeah.
He's dead too, I think, right?
If he is, it's recent because he's
Oh, maybe
pretty
not.
like, yeah.
So yeah, you guys probably came here to he's almost unbelievably wholesome and hates Morrissey. Okay, yes. I have heard this.
ND chameleon, neurodivergent chameleon, I assume. I've been awake for a couple hours, but my alarm for this stream was what finally got me out from under my weighted blanket. Oh,
Oh,
well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here for the piss course.
yeah. So a couple housekeeping things. Oh, first of all, thank you to El Sanguito for subscribing and following.
Oh yeah, okay. That's my friend who we almost raided last week when they were covering the LA was it county board. Um
Yeah,
so hopefully one day our streams will overlap so that we can raid
yeah.
because they do really cool stuff. Really
Also,
cool
thank you,
political screaming.
Space Junk Janitor, who subscribed last night or something.
Also, everyone, we got our first Twitch payment today. We crossed the $50 threshold so that we could get for ourselves your lovely subscription monies. So thank you for everyone who has elected to do that. Of course, not necessary, but appreciated, and it allows us to reinvest in things like emojis and
Microphone
streaming
arms.
accoutrements and perfume and all that. So yeah. So thank you. And
Um,
now we got to all get Maddie to that threshold, and she's streaming after this stream. So
yes. Go follow my Twitch channel if you haven't. Twitch.tv/test device underscore. Um, but if you just stick around, we will be raiding me later today, and I will be stramming for some amount of time. I'm probably going to explore this horrible machine.
oh,
Uh,
why does that one sound like a car accelerating every time?
yep, yep. This horrible soundboard from the '80s. I think from the '80s. I don't actually know for sure. Um,
Oh boy.
I really am though. I am, and I'm proud of it. I am so lucky to be Devin's
Oh
Nepo
no,
baby.
that she worked hard to get here, you guys. But it's true actually.
Uh,
Whereas I did fuck all. So
Well, okay. So the thing is, I was thinking about this recently. How have you ever seen that clip by Bo Burnham? Did we talk about this before? Maybe
Which Bo Burnham
it's not.
clip?
It's of him on a talk show, and yeah. Okay. So I figured you were. I feel like we've talked about it, but I can't remember if it was on the show. Where he's basically like, people, especially young people, will come up to me, and ask me, how do I succeed on the internet as a content creator or a YouTuber or whatever, because that's where he got his start, is YouTube. And he'll be like, it's ridiculous for me to say that I like know how to do that. At me telling someone to try to have a career on YouTube is like a lottery winner saying, "Liquidate your assets. It works." And I very
Mm-hmm.
much feel like, and that I feel like Bo Burnham is such a great like thing, because Bo Burnham is also a fucking genius. Like, he has
Mm-hmm.
been doing this since I think he's like kind of child prodigy shit with music. Like, I'm pretty sure he's
Yeah.
been doing this since he was really young, and he's fucking hilarious, and he like does stuff like, whether you like, even if you don't like his humor, you have to admit he's insanely talented.
Right.
And even he is like, won the lottery, and that's how I have a career. And I think about
Right.
that with like all content, like that sort of, like, you also are a really good, Devin, you are also an insanely good writer, and you put in the work for fucking 10 years or whatever you've been writing and putting that shit out. And it's also like, there's an element of like winning the lottery, of like, you had something go viral, and now you actually have like a platform, and people actually like see the insanely hard work. And so it's
Yeah.
like, I just got lucky, because I genuinely think there are two successful people, and kinds of successful people. There are lottery winners and nepo babies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it.
Right.
That's all success. And so
Right.
if you can't manage to be a lottery winner, try to be a nepo baby and find someone. who either
Yes.
has rich parents or won the lottery.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the always the like fraught thing with like giving people advice about creativity. And it's kind of like, and it comes out sounding so Republican or like Protestant work ethic to say like, oh, you have to only do this stuff like because you actually like it,
Right.
because otherwise it you can't have any guarantee of it ever paying off. And even if it
Mm,
does pay off, it's only through doing a lot of work for a really long time to like make the opportunity, quote unquote, for good luck to
right.
strike.
Right.
And for a lot of people, there's so many unsung posters out there. This is also something the anime sickos talk about, people
Yeah.
who are just training in obscurity, writing the most like hilarious, weird, insightful shit. And like the thing also is like success kind of for a lot of people just ruins your capacity to like make interesting work that's resonant for
Yeah.
other people. And that's something that I'm also like thinking a lot about. Like there's just only so long that I'm going to be able to write things that are useful to other people, because the amount of privilege that comes from being successful as a creative really, means that you're so insulated from other people's life experiences that what do you have to say to them that they need
Yeah.
to hear anymore? um
I think that's true, but I also think that if you're aware of it, I think there's a lot you can do. And I don't think you're at that level at all yet. I think you would have to be at another topographical level, but I mean, I don't know, not to I don't know your life, but from as a
yeah, I
friend,
think
I, I and I think being aware of that is also like, you can tell the people that are like Hollywood celebrities that know that shit and don't know that shit.
Right, right. Yeah, and Bo Burnham is another great example of somebody who is really aware of that stuff, that like he's haunted by it. And that's another
Mhm.
thing that I love about his work and find so like resonant. Like he is haunted by the parasocial impact that he had on other people, especially teen girls. And he made movies about that, and he stepped away from public life. I think part of his like psychological breakdown that he talks about, maybe, at least the shape that it took is probably related to that, that exposure and
Yeah.
and what comes with that. Um, and yeah, yeah, it's and then you have people like Agnes Callard who are examining their lives in a totally different, completely oblivious way to it.
I didn't mean for this tangent to be relevant when I started on it, and as you were talking, I was like, this also does actually feel very relevant to what we're talking about. Before we do, actually, I'm going to interrupt that beautiful segue to say the other piece of housekeeping is that we teased a therapy stream today that we are not doing today, but we will be doing next week. So if you have questions about getting a therapist, how you got your therapist, terrible therapist stories, anything like that, we would love to hear them. Either mine or Devin's Tumblr Ask box. We also have Dr. Devin Price streaming at gmail.com. Uh, that should be next Friday, right? I That should be fine for me.
Yeah, yeah, Friday would be best for me. So
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, that'll be this was I had something on this Friday, which is why this is a weird time. Um Thank you for coming out though. We still have really strong viewership, so
Yeah, yeah, and it looks like some people, jump like Jen Laham is ready to dive into this topic. So I'm glad there's a few other Agnes freaks in the chat.
yeah.
Oh, and thank you for coming over from the YouTube Foamy Fifi. So yeah,
Sick.
it's nice. Yeah, it's just nice to have people here for these conversations. But yeah, I think the therapy one will be really fun, and we'll have so much to talk about.
Dr. Devin
Dr.
Price dreaming. We
I
should we,
sleep.
do we need to do we need to just get Gmail accounts like like URLs?
Dr. Devin Price creaming. That's my chatterbait email. Oh, I'm glad that you read that article, Jen Laham. It's really, and I'll post a link in the chat again right now for anybody who does want to do the reading. It's called Agnes Callard's Marriage of the Minds. And I've uncovered other documents, which maybe we'll get to. But this is what kind of set off, at least my fascination with this person.
So, um did I
Oh, oh yeah. And for anyone who asked, don't worry if you didn't read the article. We'll do a quick rundown and the only reason we know this person exists is because this article came out and made her a main character on Twitter again after previous instances of her tweeting weird things and being weird.
Yeah. So we'll you won't be lost if you didn't read it.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I was going to try I forgot to bring up the tweet that the New Yorker tweeted so we could look through the quote retweets on it. But we can do that later.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. I have not seen that. I can pull that up too.
So, um I think actually the thing that is probably the best background. I didn't learn this until actually after I read the article. Um, Let me pull it up. I didn't do pulled up a bunch of links, um, but not enough clearly. I bet if I just type in Agnes Callard tweet, I bet it will come up.
Yeah, it'll probably be the Halloween candy tweet.
Yep, that it came up immediately. That's um, exactly what I was looking for.
She's Bean Dad Part 2.
Yeah, yeah, she did. She did really have a bean dad moment, didn't she?
Even though it's way less bad than Bean Dad, but you know,
I don't know.
if Bean Dad is true, but
It's pretty It was pretty upsetting to me as a candy freak. Um,
KPBK Bean Dad was, well, he's the person who wrote the theme song for My Brother and Me, that podcast, if you know that. But he got canceled for telling this really long story on Twitter about how his daughter was hungry and he gave her a can of beans and a can opener and told her to figure it out. And she struggled momentously for a long time and was very frustrated and hungry and cried. And he thought this was funny. Um,
and then
and
to double down really hard. I think people probably would have forgiven him if he was like, "Yeah, that was a bad thing to do and a worse thing to tweet." Um, but he dug in for days. Um, but anyway, this is a little bit of a minor Bean Dad story. 9-year-old Mama, you didn't throw out the Halloween candy. Background: we have a Halloween tradition where after the you have a Halloween tradition. No one else is
yeah,
participating.
our family has this nice tradition where I'm mean to my kids.
We have a Halloween tradition where after the kids go to bed, I throw all their candy in the garbage. The next morning, they're filled with rage. Thank you so much. Hugs and kisses. Reader, I forgot. So this is the background. Like, I'm sure there are other hilarious tweets from her. She seems like the kind of person who has tweeted shit like this more than that. But if anyone knows any, please let us know.
Oh yeah, and again, Chicago dash Geneza on Tumblr, who hopefully they'll pop into the chat, but they have a whole collection of interesting things Agnes has tweeted and debated with people. Um, I think in her work we can see really a top tier illustration of autism posting, um,
Yeah.
where you are trying to understand the world and yourself through the solipsistic exercise that is posting, and it results in people being baffled and saying, "You really live like this, and why are you telling us?"
Girl, you live like this? So do you want to try to I did we could we can I have the article up too, so we could even skim the article somewhat, although that might be more um time than we wanna.
Well, maybe we can just pull it up on screen for flavor, or for like the visual, because somebody did point out, I think it was also Chicago Dash Geneza on Tumblr, that this photo here is very clearly inspired by the Twilight posters.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
And who knows who was responsible for that, whether it was in the photo direction or it was Agnes.
Like these ones?
Yeah.
Oops. I'm buying this apparently now. You're
clearly clearly you need this on a canvas.
uh, it's oh my god, where did you go? Okay. Yeah, no, it's accurate. We need to put these right next to each other, I think, just to really compare.
The light, the color, the only thing is that they chose to somehow make her real life second husband more shadowy than the vampire man.
It's weird because it's like this article is about her, and the people in her life are set dressing, which is a fun gender reversal. I'll tell you that. That at least, but
A lot of this article and the reaction to it is very God forbid women do anything.
so let so basically I I'm trying to decide. Do you want to take a crack at summarizing,
Doing
or
the
do you
rundown.
or do you want to? We can interrupt each other too, but
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. If I forget anything, just leap in if I forget anything crucial. So this, first of all, this is in a long-standing tradition of New Yorker profiles that are basically get a look at this freak. Um, and that is the tone of the writing, that kind of self-superior attitude that you learn to love from the New Yorker or you love to hate. And this is a profile of a philosophy professor at the University of Chicago, which is on the south side of Chicago, where I'm streaming from. I'm on the north side, but well, yeah, Chubby Kumquat. This person, the New Yorker didn't do an article on her because of that Halloween candy tweet, but because she's really kind of a bit of a fascinating fixture of the University of Chicago campus.
Mhm.
So what had happened is this woman she was when she was 35. She was married to another philosophy professor, a Richard Callard, and she had a graduate student who was 27 years old. What's his name? Albert, I
Yeah, I
believe.
believe so.
Uh, and she, interestingly, since we were just talking about Halloween candy, she brought some Christmas cookies into her office to share with some of her students. And she had a leftover one, her undergrad students, and she had a leftover one that she handed to this student. No, Arnold. I'm sorry, his name's Arnold.
Thank you.
Um, and as he bit into the cookie, as she describes it, he gave her a indescribable facial expression and said, "I think I'm in love with you." And she said to him, "I think I'm in love with you too. I need to go get a divorce about this immediately."
Immediately.
And that is what she did. Her husband Richard was out of town, and she like flew to like go like first she told her family like immediately, "I want to divorce Richard." And for this Arnold kid. Yes, here's the passage. I'm sorry, Ben. I'm terrible with names. Her first husband is Ben.
See, you
But
took
she
a
tells him,
crack at it, and I was like, "You remember?" I was fully convinced you actually just knew, but no.
"Oh, that's yeah, no. I'm horrible with names." Um Apologies. So she tells her husband, "I've fallen in love with one of my students. I need to get divorced about it and pursue this. I've never felt this before."
Yeah,
And
we
her husband,
as
oh
Weeble
god.
Wobble points out, that was the inciting incident, but it was like this. Yeah, they had been going to office hours every. He had been going to office hours for every week. They had been having this. This was not totally out of the blue. It was only her understanding of what that relationship had become was out of the blue.
Yes, she became aware, and as we'll later learn, for a variety of reasons, she has this tendency to kind of not be aware of what's going on with herself or others, and then to draw a really wild conclusion based on whatever small data point she can get. Um,
Yeah.
no, no, I don't relate to that at all. Eve's apple. The cookie is
Eve's
Eve's
cookie.
apple. Agnes's cookie. He took a bite from the tree of understanding Aristotle.
Okay, do we want to interrupt this summary because I think and just talk about this part of it before we move forward, because I think the big, and I know it we get some details later, but basically a big thing that a lot of people said was this is unethical. So I'm curious, and I think that you, as also a professor, not quite in the same subject or the same, because she's also a famous I don't know, it seems a little bit different, but I'm curious what your perspective on the ethicality, the ethicalness of this is. This fucked, or is this fine?
Great question. I think we can look into some of the particulars here, because it does, I think, for me, soften how much I would condemn something like this. Like normally, I hear somebody runs off with one of their students and gets married to them instantly, and then gets them a professorship at the same school, which is what happened. And I think I
Yeah.
hate this. And
Mm-hmm.
and again, speaking of nepotism, the getting him a job element, I do hate that. I
Yeah.
don't think that's good. But here's all of the kind of particulars, because I think talking about
Sure.
this stuff in a binary way isn't, helpful. She was 35 and he was 27. Um, Again, she was I don't know if she had tenure at that point, but she was a full professor, so obviously that conveys a lot of power. As soon as they had this moment of realization, she stepped down from any kind of teaching or advising role where she would have any kind of authority over him, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very transparent about it to the department the moment that this like love confession happened. Also good. She told her husband as soon as she became aware of this feeling, and to her credit, did not pussyfoot around about what she wanted. It was very much, I don't want to be married to you anymore. We can continue raising our two children together, but I want to be with this person. And he was okay with that,
Yeah.
uh, which is kind of baffling, but great. Um, so I think when we look at all of those things in context, that their age difference was not very large, that she abdicated a position of power over him, that everybody was informed. All of those things to me are, if you're gonna do it, that's the only way to do it responsibly.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
he came on to her, and if you believe her story, and of course it's like, if this truly is an unethical thing, that's not really fair to just take her word for how it happened. But if you do take her word for what happened, it really seems like this was not. She did not groom him to this. She did not literally even realize that this was uh like
Happening.
right. Yeah. Um. So yeah, and from everything it says in the article, that is very convincing. That is like hard to believe it happened a different way.
And
Like,
they interviewed Arnold as well.
right.
Now, they was the two of them together, so you can say, if your read of the situation is she was predatory, she groomed him, she's abusing him, which some people think that, then of course, them being interviewed together, you would say you don't believe that. um I think that's a little strong for what information we have. um yeah,
Yeah.
go.
No, I agree. I think it's one of those things that I think me and you are very much in agreement of that. It's just you can't judge things based on like the way they sound. Like you can't that like, and I think that partly comes from like how we feel about abolition and you know carceral thinking in general. Like I don't think that it is good to say a professor and a student can never get together because it's always unethical. Like they're both adults. Like it's there's and that doesn't mean that you could even I if someone said the majority of times that happens is it is unethical, I would agree with them. But that is, I think, the big reason why we're against like you know that kind having those kinds of laws and working that way, because it's not straightforward. And
Right.
this feel this part of it feels fine to me.
Yes. If I feel weird about any of it, it's her getting him a job. I think
Yep.
that concept in academia, we have this concept of a spousal hire, which is if you get hired for a tenure track position, you can just get a freebie job for your spouse. That is considered normal. There are people in my psychology department who the same. I'm gonna get in trouble.
Anyway, it's a thing generally.
It happens. I have seen it happen. And to me, that is more ethically troubling. Getting your spouse a job
Yeah.
in a field, any kind of humanities, any kind of social science, something like philosophy. There are not a lot of jobs on the ground. Um, and the idea that somebody with tenure gets to just kind of like grandfather in some two people they're married to in Agnes's case. I mean,
Yeah. Did she get her first husband the job, or what is the situation? They don't talk about it in the article. Do you have any context there?
I do not. I don't know how that sequenced out.
Yeah.
But University of Chicago is very like it's like the Ivy Leagues. It's like where there's just a lot of like nepotism and elitism. This is true of all academia, but there in particular, it's easier to kind of game hiring procedures based on who you know. So,
Yeah.
but in this relationship, I don't know who was hired first or what.
But it
Um,
seems likely that it happened in one direction. Like whether it was Ben got Agnes the job or vice versa, it seems like maybe there was
yeah,
some of that too, although we don't have the details on that from this article, so.
right. Two philosophy professorships that are tenure track don't just open up ever.
Yeah.
They just don't. So yeah.
I while we're talking about ethics, I will say I think the the stuff that really bothers me ethically, and I didn't even consider that stuff because I don't have that. I don't even know about that stuff. And it's funny because no, haven't heard. I don't think that was the discussion at all, and that is like from what you're saying a normal ass thing, and that seems like you know the one of the bigger ethical things, and that is like literally that not even enough to comment on because it's so normal. But also, I think when the the bringing the kids into this whole thing is really where I get upset. And but we will are not upset, but like I think that there's some ethical dubiousness in the way that this whole situation happened in regards to the kids. But we'll get there when we talk about more.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about that. So yeah, forwarding through, Agnes and Arnold get married pretty quickly. And Agnes, again, because the relationship was very much predicated on them talking about Aristotle together, which Arnold is really, that's his area of expertise, is he's a scholar of Aristotle on a really deep level. Um, whereas she's more of a Socrates person. So similar traditions but different blorbos. Um, she perceived this relationship as this incredible, as the New Yorker title conveys, marriage of the minds, that they were kind of um, they talk in the piece about how Agnes kind of experiences thought as something you can only have with another person. You can only really have a deep philosophical examination through like a discourse with someone. And so together they were creating something that was greater than the sum of their parts, and this just incredible intellectual marriage. Um, but it kind of turns out she was experiencing new relationship energy and had never realized that was a thing
Yeah.
at all.
It I think I said this when I read it because I messaged you, Devin. I messaged you some of my thoughts immediately, and one of my biggest things was like, how does it take philosophy professors 10 years? Because this article is like, because this happens in the initial thing happened in 2011, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I yeah. So this is
Yeah.
10 years later, and the writer of the article didn't follow them that whole time, but they talk about that whole 10 years within the article. And how does it take three philosophy professors 10 years to understand shit that is in a polyamory 101 post on the Reddit polyamory subreddit? Because so much of this shit is just like, why? And she really like talks about this. And this, to preface, I really don't like this article. Not that
Mm-hmm.
not the subject, but at every turn I feel like I am fighting with the writer to understand the situation rather than the writer helping me to understand the situation, because over and over again she seems to want to like choose something that sound like make like writing that makes the situation sound profound and instead of elucidate the actual fucking situation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. I think that's a huge roadblock to our understanding of this whole fucking situation. But it really feels like over and over again, Agnes and everybody involved are just sort of like, wow, nobody's had this thought before. No one in the whole world has ever dated more than one person before. And it's like, no,
They
read a
and they
book.
invent terms for things, and this is something that's kind of
Yeah.
is useful to know. Is analytic philosophers, like, part of their belief is like you should be able to solve and understand things just through the process of logic and discourse. So like analytic philosophers are expressly against bringing in outside sources, which is part of why their entire worldview is so fucked. That's why they have to reinvent the wheel based on nothing, and come up with these really complicated ways to talk about things that, as you said, people have been talking about in polyamory or non-monogamy circles since ever.
Yeah.
You know,
I I my background with poly, I have had pretty limited actual experience having more than one relationship. Um but I started reading about poly in about 2011, 2012, and I have been reading about it and thinking about it since then, and have had limited I've been mostly just like monogamous by like technically me and my spouse's relationship has been poly the whole what 4, 5, 6 years we've been in it. It's just there's been limited like outside relationships other than that. So to be clear, it's not like I have a lot of hands-on experience, but like I don't know. And it's just like there's so much of this stuff that just feels like if you had posted about this on the Reddit polyamory subreddit, you would have learned
everybody would have been like, "Get out! You're a fool."
well, no, I don't actually think that. I think that every what they did was fine. It's the way they. So I did look up just here. It actually was they actually got married a year after the Arnold and Agnes got married a year after Ben and Agnes got divorced, and it doesn't
Mhm.
say how long it. I mean, they started the divorce right away. I don't know how long it actually took.
Right.
Um, I think that's too fast, but also fine. Um, and
Yeah, people do that.
yeah, and it's weird because she so much of the way she talks about her relationship with him is so much about marriage, and it's so strange. It's like, okay, but then why did you do that? Like, why did you not? Why did you get married so quickly? Like, why does this relationship have to be filtered through the idea of a marriage? Because so much of what she talks about is like really redefining what it means to be married, and it's like I don't know, why does a marriage matter? Like that's just a piece of
Right.
paper, and it seems, at least from what I'm getting through the filter of this author, she never even talks about like questioning marriage at its core. Like she just sort of is
Right.
like talking about what it means to be married without actually questioning marriage itself, and that is super weird to me. um
Yeah.
but
Yeah. She's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go on, go on.
Yeah, it seemed like she had these ideas combined in her mind that like her and Arnold had this really special intellectual connection. And they talk about this process that they come up with together of aspiration, that together with someone else you aspire to become a better version of yourself and more connected with this other person, to
Yeah.
kind of like erode the boundaries. Again, very new relationship energy, U-Haul kind of behavior. So I
This
think, and
relationship is so special. No one's ever had a relationship like this before.
and they talk about in the article that by the time they get married about a year later, and thank you Weeble Wobble for, or wait, was it Weeble Wobble? No, Jen Laham noticed that they said it took 3 weeks for the divorce to get finalized. So
Wow. Yeah.
roughly a year from meeting, a year and change, from meeting and from having that love confession to getting married. So I think like, yeah, she just seemed to see marriage as just the framework for combining yourself with someone else. And I guess apparently from some of her other writing that she's done about marriage and like her tweets and stuff about marriage, she like never also talks about marriage as like an apparatus of the state or how its relationship to property. She only ever thinks about it, and this is also like an analytical philosophy thing, as like the combining of souls, and this very like Socratic or more of a Platonist kind of thing. I think Plato talks about that shit, and Aristotle does too.
Forgive me, stream, for fucking with the layout. I thought it'd be nice to have us a little bit bigger.
Very straight pilled of her, Jen Laham says. That's the other thing too.
Yeah.
They're all very straight pilled.
So yes. So let's talk about what actually happened. So a lot of the criticism of this, and I don't think I actually saw this. Somehow my Twitter is just all, we're all trans people are going to get put in a camp and killed, which, fair. But I missed this one, this drama this time. So I didn't see a lot of it myself, but I'm curious because it seems like a lot of the stuff was like, the criticism was like, you know, like, first of all, I would imagine a lot of the criticism is a lot about like basically acting like Ben got cucked, like that kind of weird, like, and like, as you said, God forbid a woman do anything, like, is that true, Devin? Does that kind of feel like how people were reacting to it?
I've seen very little discussion of Ben other than "Oh, poor Ben."
Mm-hmm.
Most of the discourse on Twitter was, "This is abusive. She's abusing Arnold. She's abusing her power. If she were a man and he were a woman, everyone would see that this was predatory and grooming and that kind of thing."
Right.
That's mostly what I've seen. Plus, with a side of, "Oh my God, this woman is so pretentious, and makes awful decisions in her personal life," which
Pretentious, I don't think
yeah,
we can argue with. She's incredibly pretentious.
she's very pretentious and she is very detached from conversations that just everyday people have been having about relationship structures for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
We can definitely say that much. Um, but also, like you said, Maddie, the article is written in a particular way that kind of, um, both like reproduces Agnes's really overly complicated way of describing things while also judging it in like a sardonic way, but not explaining its own perspective, you know? So it's kind of
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. Um, so to kind of continue the actual meat of what happened is that she has this realization, decides, her relationship with Arnold is, the one perfect relationship to rule them all. And she immediately literally flies, as you said, flies to where her husband is that moment, and they talk for 2 days, and basically it sounds like he's just like, yeah, I get it. um
Mm-hmm.
he's basically like, yeah, I think I understand. And Agnes seems so wild. I do. And this is shitty of me, but I do have to wonder, like, is he like, oh, thank God, yeah, that's a great out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you know what? Yeah, sure, that's fine. But that's not the way it's written. Um, and it definitely does seem like he gets it. He's like, yeah, I do think our relationship was, maybe I can understand how you're seeing that our relationship was based off of you not understanding what it meant to be in love, which is pretty much what she says. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to, now that we know that, it doesn't make sense to be in a relationship. It would be wild to pretend that realization didn't happen. And so they, pretty immediately get divorced. Uh, I think Agnes moves in with Arnold, right?
Oh no, Arnold moves in with them.
Right. And
So
Ben,
Arnold and Ben and Agnes and Ben and Agnes's two kids are just all in a house together.
um, but doesn't Arnold have kids? No, she
No,
has
they have
kids with,
kids, and then she gets pregnant with Arnold, and
right.
then they have a third child. So then they're all kind of collectively raising these three kids,
Uh,
and all living together.
and there is one anecdote of, the writer talks to a friend of theirs, and their friend is like, the kids always seem so happy together, like they always, like they immediately enmeshed and welcome, the new, like, if from what the article says, that all went great. But this is the part for me, like, that there's two parts to this, right? I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm just straw manning, but I can really imagine, and I think the article talks some too about, people are like really skeptical of this arrangement, and people, like you were saying, people on Twitter feel bad for Ben. And
Mm-hmm.
I love this aspect of it. This and there is a specific quote in here later on and farther down in the article that talks about like unbundling the services of marriage of
Mm-hmm.
like and she kind of is like, yeah, me and Ben are still in a relationship in a way. It's just not, and still in some ways in a marriage, in what would look like a marriage, it's just not a romantic one or a physical one. And and they really talk about how the three of them have a relationship together, even though Ben is not in a romantic relationship with either of them. And I think that shit is great. Like I I I think that those kind like that really gets to how relation I don't think relationships need to be these standard things. And I think we've kind of I forget if we've talked about it on stream or if it's just things that you've talked about on your Tumblr, Devin, of like kind of like that queer platonic type stuff. um it's just so, a relationship with somebody doesn't need to be some specific thing. And I love that they created this relationship among the three of them that seemed to work really fucking well for all of them.
Yeah.
My
Yeah, and I think oh,
Oh,
sorry.
no, you go on.
No, it is a whole long tangent, so I'll jump in.
I was just going to say the question is whether that is okay for the kids, because I if this person is watching, it's very likely. Sorry, I'm going to bust your chops. You already know how I feel about it probably, but I have a very close friend, and she moved in with a couple. Like they started dating, like it was even like she was dating somebody and it was serious, and living with him, and then he like shit kind of got fucked up there, and she moved straight from that guy to this couple's house. Like, and that was the first guy was that was not a poly relationship. So this was like a, almost like a serial monogamy thing where it was like one to the other. But this second relationship was a couple, and it was a man, a guy and a girl, and they had kids. They had two kids, like 6 and 10, somewhere around there.
Okay. So yeah, pretty young.
And over the course of the relationship, I mean, pretty quickly they were calling her mom, like, and then
Yeah.
the relationship blew up, and she moved out and probably has not had contact with those kids since then, and ended up actually getting back together with the original guy, and now they have a kid. Again, if you're watching, I love you. As much as all this stuff frustrates me, I doubt you're watching, but still, I love you. But you know, and that shit is like, the kids should not have to go through that shit. That's bad. Like
Right.
that's a, borderline abusive. To
And people, oh, sorry.
no, go on.
People talk about that as a like in these kinds of situations, and I think that's a big problem with a lot of like also the reaction to this article and Agnes as a person is people put all of that on polyamory or non-monogamy
Mm-hmm.
or non-traditional, what tradition are we talking about when we say that, relationship models,
Yep.
when it's like that's pretty comparable to a problem that a lot of people have grown up with, of a parent gets divorced, really quickly remarries someone, and just kind of forces the kid to kind of accept this new person into their life when the person just hasn't, there isn't enough of a relationship there yet to really know whether the person's safe to be around your kid, or somebody that you would
Yeah.
want to be in a committed relationship with.
Yep.
And there are people like that who have like legions of awful former stepdads or former like partners, boyfriends or girlfriends,
Yep.
like that's the problem, not non-traditional quote unquote relationship structures.
Yeah, and that's how I felt about this person's relationship when I was watching it. Is I was so hopeful it was going to go good, but I was also like, this is too fast, because all of that happened in less than a year. And
Right.
if if she had just gone slower, and waited to see what the three of, a year or two later, I think it would be pretty safe to be like, yeah, actually, I think this thing is working. Let's try moving in together. Let's try me having a relationship with your kids. Because I think, as you said, I think that shit is just as negative if it's if it's a monogamous relationship. Honestly, I think the kids are probably better for this being a poly relationship because they still got two parents. They still have more, and I don't mean single to like. I don't think I don't think two parents are enough parents. I think
Right.
I think
Yeah.
our whole fucking shit of where we're the insane pressure we put on nuclear two parent families is nuts and goes against how we fucking evolved. Like there, I read this really great, and I'm curious if you have any insight in this or are familiar with this, or if this is, I'm not the professional, but is that there's a lot of evidence that, like, especially going back to early evolutionary history, like kids were raised by, like, you know, not only the larger, like, grandparents and aunts and uncles, but also, like, it takes a village kind of shit. Like that the idea that we are supposed to raise our kids on, it's insane to me that two people are expected to fucking raise an infant like a baby that just came out. That's nuts.
Right. While having to work full-time jobs and living in really isolated suburbs where there's just no childcare can be more than your rent. In most places, people can't afford it, and you also still don't have any lasting relationships to the people providing that childcare much of the
Yeah.
time. And yeah, for me, it's not even a question about evolution because evolutionary like psychology goes a lot of wild places and it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to test. But like, it's undeniable that like there have been a variety of different kinds of child rearing and family structures across a wide variety of societies. And we are living in probably the most isolated version of that, other than how, maybe European aristocracy lived,
Yeah.
that might have been more isolated. Like, other than that, and this is why I'm a big family abolitionist. I did not used to be. I used to find that concept really scary to hear. Like when I heard people say abolish the family, I was like, that sounds so unsafe. That sounds so isolating. It sounds scary. But once I read more about it, it's really just this idea of like your blood relatives don't own you even when you're a child. And so, if there are members of the community that you know and that you feel safe around, and your relatives are not that to you, you should be free to move towards that.
Yeah.
And to move towards the people that do make you feel loved. And sometimes that's a grandparent, sometimes that's a neighbor, sometimes that's the parents of a friend that you've grown up with and they know you, and they have ties to your community. But that's just not the way humans live now, and legally it's not possible because children are treated as their parents' property, and then secondarily property of the state, if not that.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, so that's kind of my feeling on it. And Yeah. And I think we don't know from looking on the outside exactly what things are like in Agnes's house. We certainly know she has some weird ideas about child rearing.
But
But
the three
yeah,
parents part sounds great. Like that,
yeah,
if this works the way that it is presented as working, um I am not surprised. Like the only thing that bothers me is the speed. Like if this had if they, had if they had understood what was happening a little better and been a little bit slower, like, I think this situation sounds great for the kids. Like, more adults in your life is, I don't know. I say this as someone who didn't have not enough adults in my life, so I know I'm biased in that way. But like, I think that is good. Um,
yeah. And I do think they do a good job, from everything that we've seen and just how we know how they all operate. It seems like they talk about everything. They might have failed a lot of non-monogamy 101 stuff, but they do know the communication part, even though they don't always know what they're communicating about.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
feel like they probably talked through a lot of these things with their kids. Probably not enough about feelings, but at least about here's what's happening and why, on a
hmm,
level of openness that probably most straight marriages that are dissolving don't do.
yeah,
Um, so that's something. Um,
yeah.
and there is a moment.
I'd almost be
Okay.
worried about the other direction, with not that there's any evidence of that the kids knew too much about what was happening in this situation, which is another thing. Like, you
Oh yeah, this is not a woman with good boundaries, right? Like we can say that.
yeah.
I'm sure they know too much about certain things, like they're carrying too much emotional responsibility for these people who have like no emotional awareness.
Right.
Um, But yeah, there's a piece in the there's a moment in the piece where the interviewer kind of asks Ben, like, most people from the outside would think you're really getting screwed here, that you're kind of still tasked with providing childcare and and supporting the family, whereas you're not getting any of like the good stuff out of it. Which for him even to be asked that question is very there's a certain very straight monogamous lens applied to that
Hmm.
that's pretty sexist, like to call it childcare for the dad to be still in the family.
Yeah.
And so, the whole question is fucked from the outset, but he's really just like, I'm I'm choosing to do this. Like I want to do this. I want to be a part of this. Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, and as Weeble Wobble just said, he's off having his own relationships. Like,
Yeah.
like he's not a victim here. And he's made it pretty clear that he's chosen to be a part of this.
A couple things. I'm really sorry. I need to apologize. I forgot to piss course.
Oh yes.
This is an important.
3 hours of piss course.
Yeah, this is a piss course stream. Um. Also, I did appreciate. Uh. Eric. Okay, but if this had been taken slow and steady, would we have content for this piss course? I think not. Means to an end. It. The. And it. This. The mess was worth it, obviously, which I do have to agree with.
And
Uh,
this is a great moment for like Agnes has that dog in her. Like this
yeah.
is have that dog in you dating.com.
Yeah. I do. I really do think that. Um. Yeah. So yeah. I'm a big fan of much of this.
Yeah. Another interesting thing that I wanted to highlight from the piece is that Agnes is famous on campus for running these late night philosophical discourses that are open to the public. I kind of want to check one out. They're called the Night Owl series, and they happen, I think, like at like 8. They start at like 8 p.m. and then they can go however late into the night as Agnes wills it. Um, and after some of this stuff went down, she kind of convinced Ben to take part in one where the two of them discoursed on the philosophy of divorce,
This stuff.
which,
Yeah.
sorry, what were you saying?
This stuff feels weird. Like
Yes.
this stuff feels weird, and they have this whole section where she seems to think that this is all great, and Ben, like, literally during the, it sounds like the author was there, or um I guess
Maybe
this would
saw a
have,
video.
yeah, maybe it was on video, but it like, the way they describe it, like, Ben literally keeps trying to take the topic in a more like, uh
Like abstract philosophical, not personal.
right, and she keeps trying to bring it back to their relationship, and that sucks. And then also, I mean, has she written multiple books on this now, or at least one she was writing? Let's see if I can find that.
Yeah, she's written a lot of like academic philosophical books. Like yeah, her current one is about, I believe, divorce, that she's working on.
Yeah, so,
Um,
and that's a weird thing, to take your personal relationship and family, um and turn it into this, you know, now I'm gonna write, now this is my job. This is my, this is, I don't know, if I have the right words for it, but that feels weird, if everybody's not on board, and kind of doesn't seem like everyone is, and that feels weird.
Yeah. It's for art said, we all share experiences from our own lives to aid the understanding of others. It seems like she's just doing that on a somewhat larger scale. Well, yes and no, in my opinion. And another thing is like, for a lot of autistic people, and for those who haven't caught this in the chat, they do mention in the piece, Agnes is autistic. She's, she mentions being diagnosed. Not that that matters, but, that does come up in the piece. Um, and pausing for sirens for a second here. Um, a lot of autistic people, if you don't have like empathy or good like awareness of your own emotions for whatever reason, you do kind of use your own life experience and feelings as they kind of emerge to try and retroactively understand how the world works and things like that. um, and that's where you get things like the stereotype of neurodivergent people always making a conversation about our own experiences when somebody shares something, right? which is not always bad, and that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah.
like, it does become different when like your ex-husband is like palpably uncomfortable, and maybe she can't pick up on that. I mean, I really could believe that with how she operates, that she really has not learned those cues. But I mean, I write about my personal life a lot in my own writing, and it sometimes causes problems. Like it's not. There's a lot of risks and hurt that can come with it, and
Yeah.
yes, profiting off of it. It's complicated. Is it worthwhile to do? Yes, sometimes, but yeah, it also comes at a big cost.
It feels like a thing you have to navigate intentionally and make sure you are doing ethically. And again, I don't think there's hard fast rules about what you how you need to do that, but it does feel like, you know, you need to be thinking about other people's like experiences and feelings when you write about them. And from everything from everything this article presents, it doesn't feel like she has done that super well. And also, but also, it's hard to know because this article does feel like it's intentionally like you said, it's written from the perspective of, look at the freak. Oh my God, I just realized, Agnes Callard, you are our freak of the week.
Congratulations, Agnes. You're the freak of the week. Wow. Oh my God. I'm glad that she can be freak of the week instead of Jesse Single, because
Oh God, he doesn't
he's
deserve it.
freak. He's not even a freak. He's too normal.
No. Also, freak is a loving term that we apply to people to creatures that we love and we don't love them.
Yes.
But anyway, we're getting ahead
We're
of
freak
ourselves.
positive here. Yeah.
Ugh. So yeah, let's talk about the autism piece because I'm very curious about your it's weird in this article because it feels like so much of this is so colored by that in a lot of ways, but this article like says it as an aside and never references it again, and so we also have no clue how much, if at all, she understands her own autism and how much this stuff is like specific to her because of her autism, or not specific to her but specific to her as someone with autism, um because she does talk so much about like this is so revelatory from on a like humanity scale, which is like a thing that is kind of I'm frustrated by her in the way she does that, but it's also anyway. I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious for you to talk about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess to get at that question, I will kind of touch on something that we haven't like explicitly touched on that happens later in the piece, or kind of starts happening throughout the piece, right around the time that Agnes and Arnold get married. Like it mentions that like by the time they get married a year after, kind of getting serious with each other, already some of that passion and new relationship energy has started to cool, and some of her statements about marriage and what marriage means start to become a little bit more tentative or questioning. And then like the whole like latter half of the piece from there on is about her and Arnold talking about what is our marriage, what even is it, what are we getting out of it, and eventually deciding to open it up to some extent. But the way that they arrive at that is like the most philosopher way. Like Agnes doesn't say, I would like to date other people, or what, how do you feel about, having sex with other people, dating other people. Like they don't have a conversation like that. Instead, they sit down and have a conversation that's like, is there anything in our marriage agreement that says that we can't date other people, or any reason why we would assume that it includes not dating other
Oh my
people? I think
God.
is how she puts it. And
You're
they both can,
so close. You're so close to understanding that all of this shit is built on assumptions and we should question those assumptions, but you haven't quite gotten there. You're rules lawyering it instead of like understanding that all this shit is based on assumptions and we need to question those assumptions. Yeah.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah, instead of talking about feelings, which again, I think this is a very autistic thing for her, like instead of talking about wants and feelings, it's all philosophy for her.
mhm.
That's how she mediates the fact that she actually does have wants and feelings, which that's the problem, that she's not acknowledging or can't acknowledge those things. So they both decide together, well, I ain't exactly say we're monogamous. I ain't exactly say we're polyamorous, but I ain't exactly not say we're polyamorous. And so let's do it.
What are
And they
they?
come up with a term for it called the variation.
Yeah. And then okay, so this annoyed me also. So okay, yeah, let's actually quote this since I actually found it up. Um yeah, and they talk about the relationship being aspirational, which is a whole thing that we should try to if if I'm even understanding that part of it. Um uh she wondered what it would look like if she and Arnold integrated new romantic. See, and that I forgot about that. That like literally she bring according to the article she brings it up to bring new perspective on their talks of philosophy, not like I want
Yes.
to go fuck, like which is crazy. Um, Arnold integrated new romantic relationships into their marriage. They would all keep talking about philosophy, but with fresh ideas in the mix. They asked each other whether it would violate the terms of their marriage if they became romantically involved with other people. We didn't think there was any good reason other than the usual conventions of marriage to answer that question with a yes. They referred to their new agreement as the variation. And then the article never refers to that again,
Right.
which
Yeah,
is
they never talk about
so
how it
weird.
goes. Yes. And I think, as you were just saying, like how weird it is that she brought up non-monogamy as like a way to solve the fact that the philosophy in the relationship had started to feel stale. I think philosophizing is literally how Agnes has sex. Like,
uh,
I think she
yeah.
also has sex, but I think philosophy is sex to her. And some of the comments in the chat about the like the asexual and aromantic perspective on these things
Mm-hmm.
is kind of interesting. Like
Yeah, as someone who's very
ethical to come.
as as someone who is very much not aromantic, I actually had that. I also felt that way, but I wasn't. So it's interesting that somebody who is saying they are aromantic is is saying that too. Um,
Yeah.
and it's frustrating because again we are so much trying to understand the situation through this filter of this article, which is really not helping. I don't think.
Yeah. But yeah, to kind of like answer the question of like seeing this through an autistic lens, like it just screams to me like the way that I used to like only over intellectualize every single thing I was doing, even though my actual choices that I was making, if you look back on them, they were totally like batshit, impulsive, emotionally mediated things. But I would have some like really complicated intellectual tapestry laid over everything. Um, Even if it was something as simple as like you've got dysphoria, you dumbass, like you like just things like that, you
Yeah.
know. And a lot of and some of this is stuff that we've talked about before, just like a lack of body awareness that a lot of autistic people have. And I don't think that's necessarily innate to autism. I think it's because we've been told that how our bodies feel and move through the world is wrong so often that we check out from listening to it.
Yep.
Same thing with emotions. Autistic people are kind of written off as not understanding emotions. I think it's because we're not given the tools to listen or to validate them. And to a similar lesser extent, the empathy problem. Neurotypical people express their emotions in a different way that we can't always recognize, and we're not speaking the same language. So Agnes in how she writes and thinks just reminds me so much of how like me and some other like quote unquote low empathy autistics that I know like describe trying to figure out how people feel in the most like convoluted ass way.
Just like the fucking murder chart on the like red string.
Yeah, the Pepe Silva of like, well, they said this and then they did this and then they did that. And then it's like, I think you're just hungry, dog. Like
You need to take a shit. Like that's why you're uncomfortable.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm kind of going through that right now with like this like decaf lifestyle and like realizing so many things that I would like game out how to solve this hypothetical problem I created in my mind was actually just I was caffeinated and I thought everybody was mad at me.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. That that makes a lot of sense. It definitely feels like, and this again is this weird trying to parse what is actually going on through this weird filter. It feels like there are things that she doesn't understand about herself that is she is trying to understand through her relationship, which I don't think is a very healthy way to do that. I think that I don't know. Maybe that's more of a definitive statement that I mean to make, but it does feel like from this article there is like whether there is some aromantic or asexual piece to that she's not understanding, or maybe it's just that she hasn't like kind of understood the ways in which she's masking her autism, or the ways in which that makes her experiences different. And like it feels like she is trying to make sense of the world without and her place in it, and while fundamentally missing something about
Yeah.
herself. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but
Yeah, I think, and that kind of reminds me of something that jumped out at me the first time I read through the piece, that like she's a really interesting portrait of like what the like I'm going to use some of the stigmatizing terms just so we know what we're like talking about in terms of like external like judgment, like but like the borderline profile
mm-hmm.
in some autistic people. A lot of autistic women who get misdiagnosed as borderline. I mean, I would argue all borderline diagnoses are a misdiagnosis, blah blah blah. But um like if you have trouble connecting with your own emotions or the emotions of others, that can be a very solipsistic existence. And solipsism is just this idea that like the only way of understanding the world is through the self. Like the self is the origin of all knowledge. That's very lonely. It's a feedback loop. You can't really understand anything if that's all you have. So it seems like the one way that she's been able to break out of that is through these discourses and these really intense relationships with other people, um, which is a really common thing for a lot of autistic people. And so then, we make some relationship decisions that are like, you know, codependent, get too serious way too fast, project things onto other people, overly like emotionally reliant on one singular other person, that kind of stuff. Because that's just your only means of connection that you have, especially in a culture that says like marriage is the main relationship
Yeah.
structure.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of see it as a bunch of those kind of things up in the air, that like she was never given tools for understanding herself. And then she also had this very straight idea that like a relationship, a marriage is how you find connection and grow as a person and learn to understand yourself. And so it's just like, that's just like the cul-de-sac she keeps driving down, and
Yeah.
keeps being shocked when like 10 years later it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, still just a roundabout. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And it's so strange because you can actually see the way that continues, because at the end of the article, I forgot about this when we were talking about books, but at the end of the article, it talks about how she's writing a book now about non-standard relationships. Um, and like I'm trying to remember, she was it the writer or her or Agnes that says something like there's the tragedy is there's never enough people. Do you remember what like I'm trying to
No, I don't remember that line,
yeah,
but that really, oh.
when I asked about the nature, Agnes eventually wants to write about unconventional family arrangements like hers, but she has also noticed that when people write about such topics, they are both celebratory and defensive, as if they were trying to put a good face on it. She doesn't want to draw conclusions until she can, quote, grasp the real thing in all its tragic splendor, she told me. When I asked about the nature of the tragedy, she sent me a list of 16 points. However many people you have is never enough, was the first point on the list. One is not enough. This is part of the tragedy of monogamy, but neither is two or three. She went on to describe how differently she and Ben and Arnold dealt with their fears of aging and death and their unspoken wishes for their children, the realization that honesty is also brutal and intolerable, the understanding that passion is unsustainable. Um, yeah.
And that is such a like, forgive the stigmatizing term, like codependent framework. Like one person is not enough, but neither is two or three. It's like, girl, I get it, but that's because you are putting all of your your selfhood in other people.
Yeah.
Like where, even though she's like a very strong, imposing figure, and you can't say she's not selfish, right? But like there isn't like a solid root there, it feels like, of
Hmm.
self-concept that's like,
Yeah.
something she can be in unto herself.
And again, I really want to, like, so little of this is quotes. I mean, the longest quote we get is like one of those quotes. It's like less, it's like not even the full sentence she probably said. And so I think that is the most frustrating thing to me about this whole thing is I I feel confident about my reading of the how the article presents it, but I feel like that's so could be so skewed, and so much of this could be like, the New Yorker writer wanting to present her as this sort of like tragic figure, and yeah, just this, look at this freak energy. And yeah, I'm so curious how she actually talks about this. So,
Yeah.
but also,
um
and then the other point about the, because it says she's writing a book on this, and it's so much like, why aren't you reading a book? Like, I don't know. Like, it just seems like you still, from the article, it seems like you still don't have basic understandings of non-monogamy and how non-monogamy works for most people. Why are you writing a book? Like, I don't know. Like,
Literally, yes. I mean,
yeah,
and that plugs into a couple of comments in the chat I wanted to highlight. Jen Laham said, I think if she was more plugged into a neurodiverse community, a lot of this stuff wouldn't feel like revelations.
yeah,
Girl needs more weird friends, followed up
yeah,
immediately by Argo Gobot, who said, part of her problem is only reading 2,000-year-old books.
yeah. I
And
bet
it's true.
I bet even if she just had queer friends, like even if they were super normie queer friends, I feel like this stuff is so much like I don't know. I'm thinking about that meme of like the, explain talking about gender with cis people, and it's like Plato, and it's like talking about gender with or no, sorry, talking about gender with trans people, and it's like the Plato like conversing or whatever. And then it's like talking about gender to cis people is just like a baby with blocks, and it feels like,
Right.
I think that so much of like, the cis het white straight kind of Western thing is so much the most like sheltered from that kinds of conversations. But at least, and I feel like, not that all queer people necessarily have a better understanding of all this stuff, but it's like at least slightly better, it feels like people, if you're queer, you've at least heard of somebody having a non-standard relationship, like.
Right. Agnes is literally, from that meme, she's the philosopher holding a block.
Yeah.
Like she
I
has the most
understand
simple.
everything.
Right. I've seen every side of this block, and it's like, yeah. But I think also, and Neurodiverse Chameleon said a similar thing about just how lonely and isolated them all having to figure this stuff out without context or information or community must be. But the thing is, I think she is in love with the romance of that. Like she's an analytic philosopher. She thinks she's doing this divine intellectual pursuit. Somebody else mentioned maybe she has relationships as like a special interest, and like she really like chews on this bone intellectually. And I think she can't give up this idea that like she's special. And this is a very University of Chicago fucking thing. They're all very like, they're like that up there. They like are like living in a different reality. And they're very privileged and very isolated. And I think that's a big piece of it too, the like wealth and the elitism
Yeah.
and the academia of it all. um and so I think she hasn't chosen to put herself around the freaks, and I think that's part of it too, because I think she's in love with that romance of the tragic that she talks about.
I'm so hopeful, honestly, because maybe this was written early days of her writing that book, but um I do. Yeah, it even says Agnes eventually wants to write about unconventional family arrangements. So I think this is early days for that. So I think that could be so beneficial if she really does talk to people outside of, I hope she just doesn't find all of the poly people that are, rich and white. like
Yeah.
like because if she
Oh,
really
yeah.
does find people, I don't know,
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm picturing her like getting into a polycule with Erica Moen
Who is
of
that?
ohjoysextoy.com. She like she's a much loathed figure, but mostly just for
Oh,
cringe reasons. She writes sex toy reviews. She lives in the Bay Area. She was lesbian identified until she met one British man, um, and then married him. And then she's honestly not that bad in retrospect, but people dunk on her a lot for
she
cringe.
wrote the comic about she does comics, right?
Yeah, she did the cuckolding. Well, her husband wrote the cuckolding comic that is very understandably dunked on for not acknowledging the race aspect of that kink.
Okay.
Um,
I was thinking of the one where she likes to wear a packer.
oh yeah,
It's a fetish thing for them, which is like both fine and like how are you not gonna even slightly acknowledge the transness, like sexualization of trans women thing that you're playing with, and you're not even gonna like think about that.
oh, she has worse trans comics than that. She has one from a long time ago about like finding all trans men so hot because they're the best of both worlds and they're so feminine and but they dress masculine, like real chaser hours. This was a long time ago, and she's not like that anymore, but it was bad. Yeah.
Foamy Fifi. There is not a inherent race accent aspect to cuckolding. It is just it there very much can be like um, I think uh, a really common dynamic for cuckolds is like there's it is like the straight white couple, and the guy wants his wife to get fucked by a big black man, a bull, and there is an aspect of humiliation in the racial element to it. Like the black guy is the big like animalistic black man, and I'm just too beta and to live up to that. And that is like a super common kind of aspect to cuckolding, but not inherent to cuckolding at all. um,
Right. Yeah, it's just something you have to be conscious of when you're moving through those spaces. And if you look at any porn that's made about it, you have to block like a lot of accounts that are just really, really objectifying to Black people.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I took us on a whole Erica Moen
No. Oh,
side angle. What,
oh,
what were we talking about?
Modelo Zero. I mean, as a trans girl, I'm kind of like, if a cis woman would want a dick while staying a woman, go for her. But from Erica's track record, I would doubt it was a vibe. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that comic was not even necessarily like transphobic. It was just like, it's wild that you in a cis het relationship are playing with this, and you're trying to write a comic where you're educating like from an educational standpoint, and you don't even acknowledge that part of it. Like, it wasn't that anything she did was wrong, or it's just like, think about it a little more. Like, recognize
Right.
I'm somebody who is like, I mean, this is a whole tangent maybe we talk about sometime, but I have many thoughts on what does it mean to like calling someone a chaser, and like objectifying trans women for their genitalia, and you know i I don't know.
We should do a stream on that because
I
yeah, we
would
should have a chaser stream.
love that. I definitely I don't know, I have thoughts on it. I feel bad because I know they're not every trans woman's thoughts, and so I'd almost like to have somebody who like another trans woman who doesn't feel the way I do, because I'm very much a non-op trans woman. Um, like I like my dick and I don't want to get rid of it, and I like when people like that I have it, but I also acknowledge so much that like that's a thing, that doesn't fucking mean that it's okay for people to just objectify trans women for their dicks. Like, anyway, it's a whole thing. So if you have thoughts about that, that is a great thing to send me asks about that if you have thoughts about it. If you have questions for me about that, or thoughts of your own as a trans person, I would love to hear that stuff, because that would be a great stream topic at some point.
Yeah, and I think you're right that we should get a guest on it because my intuition, especially based on what you just said, is that both of us, our takes are a little bit more like chaser neutral, or like there are people that get called chasers who we would probably think are like fine that actually aren't, a problem, and then people who are. So it'd be kind of nice to have a perspective of someone who's a little bit more like, you know.
Yeah, or maybe if we could just find some writing from somebody to like that is kind of on the other side of that vibe.
Hmm.
But oh,
And yeah,
shout out
okay.
to sorry, this is a total tangent but very important. Binary trans girl who wants to be op, but the secret third option is so interesting. If anybody who's curious about that, um, I I'm so excited to tell you about a subreddit called R Salmasian. It is have you ever heard of this, Devin?
Yeah, you've mentioned it before.
Okay, yeah, there is a subreddit that is an amazing resource that of a bunch of people who have gotten non-standard bottom surgery. Frequently, um, I Salmasian. Yeah, Salmasian. Um, Based off of Salmasius, atypical naiad nymph of Greek mythology, rejected the ways of virginal Greek goddess Artemis in favor of vanity and idleness. So I don't know the specific, but it's basically uh, what is the word most people would use? The shitty intersex phobic.
Oh,
Uh,
hermaphrodite.
yes, it is sort of
Yeah,
similar in to the idea of like what people would think that would be. But hermaphrodite is obviously a really it's like less about the transphobia of it and more about the intersex like bigotry, which is a thing
right.
that trans people aren't intersex and you don't get to you don't get to reclaim intersex phobic terms. I'm sorry.
That's right. And same thing with saying that an intersex animal is non-binary representation. Like,
Yeah,
no,
don't get
that's
to
not
do that.
yours.
Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's a huge, awesome repository of people that have had non-standard bottom surgery. And if you're interested in that stuff, check it out because there are pictures of people with healed surgery and stuff like that. It's very, very, very cool.
Yes. And yeah, there is, just for people who don't know, there are a variety of different bottom surgery options, and they almost all of the quote unquote non-standard ones get short shrift. There is penile preserving vaginoplasty, there's vagina preserving phalloplasty. A friend of mine just shot a porn with somebody who has a phalloplasty dick and still has a vagina. You can also get something called a minimal depth vaginoplasty, which means it's you have a surgical vagina, and you can have it either have no depth or have it kind of shallow so that it could be penetrated with like a finger, a small amount or something like that, or however kind of deep you want that's feasible for you. And there's benefits and drawbacks to each of them, and just different aspects of the healing. You don't have to dilate, for example, if you have a shallow depth one. Um, so there are options, and I think a lot of people write off bottom surgery as not for them or something they could never have, because we talk about it all the I don't know, people just say a lot of nasty things about people who get bottom surgery and what the results are like, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of great options, and
Mm-hmm.
anybody can get them for any reason, like.
Yeah. If Erica Moen wants to get phalloplasty, but stay cis, I am all for that, and I that's only going to make phalloplasties easier and to get and better, like new interesting ways, and yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, total tangent on a
Yeah.
tangent on a tangent.
Yes, but it seems like people are here for it, so that's good.
Um, what were we talking about before we went on a tangent on a tangent? Did we have
Oh,
more to say about this article?
I think we got into the Erica Moen thing because we were talking about Agnes needing to have more friends, or like at
Yes.
least enter like the poly community, even if it's the most cringe ask people, because then at least
Yeah.
she would know what NRE is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and no, nobody apologized for derailing. Like this was a delight, and
Oh,
from the view numbers, people are really liking it. So great.
yeah. I love when we go on big tangents and would like to do that more. The only reason I try not to ever is only because I want to make sure we hit all the things that we planned on talking about. But that's more about our stream schedule than anything else.
Yeah, and this is a fun one. This one's kind of a toy box of weird people. So
And piss course. Not that that's piss
course.
course. I guess it could be a
Yes.
different kind of piss course depending on your proclivities.
Yes. I mean, since we are talking about kind of like transition related surgeries and things, I guess it would be an optimal time to switch to talking about Jesse Singal, unless
Yeah.
there's more that we wanted to cover here.
Let's. I think I felt good about where we were at, and so if you do, I'm down. Let's open the floor for questions about. Did anybody else read the article and have thoughts that we didn't talk about? Did anyone have any questions for us about this article that didn't get answered because we missed them? While people are writing, did you? I was trying to think of. I think I have pretty good references for that whole discussion.
Oh yeah, let me see if there's anything else to pull up.
Yeah.
But
Do you
if you
have
feel like you
anything?
already have links,
I have some. I think I have some stuff. So unless you had something
okay.
specific, I think we're good. Yeah. Who did the reading? um.
Oh my God, Twitter's layout changed since this stream started, at least for me.
Wait. What? In the
Twitter looks
dashboard?
like, yeah, it looks completely different for me now.
Oh, weird. You can if you're in the dashboard, you can actually customize that yourself. So I don't know if it went to a different profile or something, but yeah, nobody needed to do the reading. We will only joke about that. We will assume you didn't do the reading.
Yes, yeah, we love to info dump, so
Yeah.
it's all good.
It's on this website. It's Jeff Bezos who messes with the wires. So this is
Yes,
Bezos's website. Thank you very
even
much.
worse. Well, not even worse. Equally bad. Oh, and May Valence asked opinions on Rachel Aviv's other work. Oh God, she published a pop psych book. Oh dear. Let's see here.
Oh yeah, am unfamiliar.
Oh, Strangers to Ourselves, Unsettled Minds, and the Stories That Make Us. Well, I hate this already. Um,
Read the description.
okay. Um, this sounds like some real Oliver Sacks type shit, and I mean that in a negative way.
Do you not like Oliver
Because
Sacks?
he's a charlatan. A
Wait,
little bit.
what? Oh,
Like
I just didn't know this. I'm sorry. I have
some of
to.
his yeah, no, it's some of his case studies, especially when he has like covered when suddenly like he talks about himself having certain neurological conditions right after like reading about them.
Oh
There's
no.
there's some critiques of it. I don't know, I'm not a neuroscientist. My amount of like training in neuroscience is limited, just enough to know how many flaws there are in a lot of pop neuroscience and how it gets reported and like methodology and stuff. And so I think, yeah, he's kind of all over the place, but
Oh,
I'll,
that's a shame. I didn't know that, but that absolutely
yeah.
makes sense.
Okay. Acclaimed award-winning New Yorker writer Rachel Aviv offers a groundbreaking exploration of mental illness in the mind and illuminates the startling connections between diagnosis and identity. Okay. I have no idea where this is about to go. I have no idea if I hate it or if I love it. Strangers to Ourselves poses fundamental questions about how we understand ourselves in periods of crisis and distress. Um, Rachel Aviv writes about people who have come up against the limits of psychiatric explanations for who they are. Okay, okay, maybe making points. Um, it sounds like it's very based on just individual case studies, though. She follows an Indian woman celebrated as a saint who lives in healing temples in Kerala. an incarcerated mother vying for her children's forgiveness after recovering from psychosis, a man who devotes his life to seeking revenge upon his psychoanalysts, and an affluent young woman who, after a decade of defining herself through a diagnosis, decides to go off her meds. Yeah.
Very you'd have to read it to know. Um
Sorry for the siren, everyone.
oh, you're fine. It's pretty muted. SP Fee, I'm just super annoyed Aviv doesn't say NRE or poly. Like, how do you write this entire arc? Yeah, that's actually a really good point because we talked a lot. I don't know if you've been here the whole time. I think we talked a lot about how Agnes Callard doesn't seem to know those kinds of even understand that those things exist outside of her, you know, super big brain. But it's interesting that Aviv, that the writer doesn't go like, "Hey, this is a thing." Like it's crazy that, like you're right. You're a journalist. Do the research. Like I know this isn't like a news article. It's like a, I don't know. It's not opinion. It's
Profile. It's yeah. If it were not in, let's say, the New Yorker or maybe like Harper's or something like that, like if it were in any other like more journalistic outfit, they would totally need to quote like a relationship therapist or like a polyamory, like activist, whatever. Like they would find some talking head to quote who would be like, well, this is actually really common.
yeah. I mean, usually in a lot of, especially the New York Times, would probably be some bullshit person that is like, I'm the polyamory expert, but actually, if you look at what I've done, I'm Doctor Kills Poly people or whatever. um, yeah, yeah, I agree. Um,
um, ND Chameleon, we totally forgot to mention this, but yes, she's also a scab.
what?
Speaking of bad labor practices, yes, in 2019, I don't know if grad students at U Chicago, I think they did successfully unionize, so good for them. And I hope Loyola follows suit quickly, though we faced a lot of resistance in that. But grad students were picketing and not teaching, and a lot of other instructors were striking in solidarity. And instead, Agnes was like, "What does it mean to cross a picket line? I'll only know this if I do it."
So get fucked.
Yes.
uh,
Yeah. So
Yeah, she just let Collard's story float without any context. Mono friend sent it to me and was like, "Oh my god, just say the word." Yeah. Oh, thank you for linking the article SPF. And also, if anyone has any trouble with the paywall, try an incognito window or your equivalent in your browser. There's also 10foot.io, or excuse me, 12foot.io, 12ft.io, which did seem to work for. It doesn't always work, but it did seem to work for the New Yorker for getting through the
yeah,
paywall.
yeah.
Um, what's a line really?
And yeah, that's the thing. All of her politics seem to be a real like kind of conservative, but not exactly, like mishmash of just like questioning anything that's like anything that's kind of taken for granted as like a slightly left or liberal, like but still kind of traditional like worldview. But it's very like, again, it's like self-serving over intellectualization. I feel like she does what she wants to do, and then she comes up with a weird, complex philosophical explanation for it. Is
Um,
my
I
read.
I would like to answer a little bit of. I think it was Chubby Kumquat who asked, "Want to hear more about Yelsut on Poly, but too big of a topic for now." I think we totally could speak at least briefly about that. And then that's on the Internet Archive. Very good thought, ND Chameleon. I had not even thought about that. Um, but before we get off farther from this topic, I kept Googling to get the article every time I needed it, and I have not read this. I just saw it on Google when I was trying to find the article that we've just talked about. Um, but this is from the American Conservative
Oh
about
boy.
presumably a reaction to that article called "The Marriage Monster."
Oh my God.
And I think we need to at least take a peek and see what fresh horrors this is. Philosopher Agnes Callard veils low motive in high virtue, and in so doing is only an extreme example of us all.
Oh Lord.
So we're not going to get too deep in this, but I have to know at least a little bit. Um, I'll just read sections. Look, marriage is hard. I'm only weeks away from being officially divorced. Look, marriage is the
Hmm.
highest institution for man, and you are spitting in the face of God if you get divorced. But I'm getting divorced.
I'm me, a person whose husband just asked me for a divorce on why people who ask for a divorce are evil.
It's like that article about the people, how it's super abusive to drop your parents for being Trumpers. Did you read that? Or I didn't read it. I just
Yes.
saw it.
Oh, well,
Oh.
that's a whole world too. Like, yeah, the parental abandonment community is a very interesting wormhole.
Oh,
Um,
okay, Devin. The chat may have read it while it was on screen, but do you want to take a guess who filed? Who asked for the divorce? This author or his wife?
I think it was, yeah, not the person who wrote this piece. It's gotta be.
Yep.
Like that's
Uh.
like literally like just the joke. I was just joking when I said that, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. Um. Okay. Blah blah blah. This is just about him and how he's so good at divorce. Uh. Wait. I accepted a lot of private pain over the past decade out of love for my kids and wanting to protect them. I don't think I did anything remotely heroic. I think it's what moms and dads should do, period. Hear me clearly. I'm not justifying accepting abuse, drug or alcohol abuse, infidelity, or things like that. I'm talking about accepting unhappiness, lonely, and things like that, at least till the kids are adults.
I'm just saying you should be miserable.
Ah. uh, so, yeah. So he has this quote uh, about from the article about views romantic relationships as the place where some of the most pressing philosophical problems surface in life. Um, every conversation as if it was integral to life's work, as it was for Socrates, and he responds to that with gross.
Oh, because Socrates was a big gay. Is that why? Is that why he said that?
Gross. Now, if you read the story, you'll see they formed a parentheses non-sexual threesome because they all got along and because Agnes and Ben's kids liked having their dad around. You might be able to make a case that Ben is sacrificing heroically for his kids. No, he addresses that. But he doesn't see it that way. Ben comes across not as heroic self-sacrificer, but as a beta male. There it is. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, ding,
Can you hit the
ding.
Jordan Peterson button?
Up yours, woke moralists.
We got it. He said it.
Yes, he said the thing.
Oh, man. Okay, so let's I we're not gonna read this whole bullshit on stream at least, but let's go down to the bottom and see kind of read his last bit. I think Agnes Callard is a bad person for living the way she does. But in judging her, I recognize that I'm kind of judging myself too. And wow, that's a shocker.
Self-awareness. Self-awareness. Great.
Insofar as I'm guilty of callously treating real people close to me as characters in a story, I don't have enough insight into myself in the situations to know for sure if I've been unjust, but I hope I'm self aware enough to realize blah, blah, blah. Just more about you. Close the book on that part of my life. Okay. We all treat other real people as characters in a story to some extent. My folks and my sister and her kids did it to me, though none of them were writers. My feelings, my hopes, my dreams, none of them mattered except insofar as it served the story that they. Fascinatingly, he does seem to be making an argument that a similar argument that we said, except he's like assuming it's what he's saying is true rather than kind of couching it in like this is kind of what it seems like could be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, blah blah blah. Yeah, nothing interesting. I was hoping this was going to be a lot worse, but anyway, he said the word beta male, and that was enough that we got to see this
Yes.
piece of shit.
It is interesting that he does have some conclusions. Like even the like subtitle for the piece was like, oh yeah, she's just doing what she wants. Like he said this in a more morally condemning way, but like she's just doing what she wants and then intellectualizes it.
Right.
Um, which he thinks that's an evil thing and that people need to put aside their more base desires for sex or new relationships. Whereas our take instead is like, know thyself, Agnes, please.
Yeah.
Please, it'll make your life better. It'll be better for everyone else if you can just own up to what you're feeling and communicate it, um, instead of this weird intellectual exercise of a life that you're doing.
If you don't know this, I probably most of our chat already does. So forgive the if this feels patronizing, but the alpha beta male stuff comes from a study on wolves that was bullshit. Like literally, it was a hierarchy that developed because they were in captivity and does not exist in the wild. And even there was a guy who wrote a book on specifically how wolves, not taking it to like um comparing it to humans, literally just writing about how the hierarchies that he observed in the wolves he was studying, and he has since retracted it and been like, yeah, this was all bullshit. I took a sample size of one and assumed that it was true of all wolves, and it's just not. It's just complete fucking bullshit.
And that's basically true of like evolutionary psychology in general in a slightly different way, where they just kind of take some story that they have that's rooted in, like the nuclear family, usually, and like very a particular kind of gender binary, 1950s gender binary kind of standards, and then try to retrofit that to what they imagine early humans were living like based on almost no archaeological evidence.
Isn't that Jordan
Um,
Peterson's whole thing too?
I mean, it's related. Like he doesn't quite go full Evo psych because he takes it more to like a weird spiritual place where it's like about your like not exactly divine masculine, divine feminine, but kind of like this like ascended, feminine and masculine aspects. Um, so it's not quite the like we were kings, we hunted the mammoth kind of thing. But
Right.
his fans like that stuff. Like they're in the same milieu for sure. He uses
Up yours,
lobsters.
woke moralists.
Yeah, that's literally what I was thinking. Is the lobsters. Um, Yeah, I did really like the picture that was on that article. It was it was like they found a screenshot, like a frame from one of her videos where she looks like that screaming the screaming lib meme that all of the like alt-right YouTubers use as every one of their thumbnails.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's what um did we I don't know if we can talk too much about poly before we move on, but yeah, like I said, I have been nominally poly for a long time with very little um, actual, not none, but not a ton of actual experiences. Unfortunately, the thing that I have come to understand is that I'm the worst, and I never did any of the actual book reading because it's hard for me to read books. But then I found out they were all kind of bad in their own ways anyway. uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's more than two. Was specifically written and uses a lot of examples from the author's own relationships. That and then it came out that he was super abusive to all of them and controlling. And I think actually a lot of the way that the poly community can sometimes talk about boundaries actually comes from that kind of stuff, which kind of sucks. But uh, I think the big thing for me is that I think that I would encourage anyone, even people who would never become poly, to learn some of the basic terms and some of the way that poly people will talk about relationships, because basically I think that monogamy is entirely built on assumptions. You know, like there's this idea that, and I've talked about pieces of this a bunch of times. Um, but um, basically, like monogamy is this like you don't ever discuss the terms of your agreement, right? Like it's always like, oh, we're dating or we're together, and that means we don't have sex with other people, and that is like the base assumption of what a relationship is. And people don't question that, and then they don't question all of these other things about what does it mean to be in a relationship with another person, and that fits into our like especially white and western, but not solely, like conception, like overemphasis on the nuclear family and family as being a thing you do to have babies, and that all that misogynistic kind of stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it is so important for everyone to question what a relationship is, and that doesn't mean you have to do things differently than those assumptions. Like I am, I like am, I am married. I wanted to get married regardless of the like the legal what the legal stuff actually means. Um, and we rode the relationship escalator. We started dating, we moved in together, got married. We want to try now. We'd like to raise kids someday. Like that's the standard thing. Um, but that doesn't have to be what a relationship is about. And if you learn what assumptions all of that stuff is, it will improve your relationships because of you'll know you're doing those things because you want to, and not just because it's the assumption. And you'll understand if you have a conversation with your partner, like you'll understand that that is like that they even have the same assumptions as you, because we all most people just sort of assume dating and relationships and marriage mean the same thing to everybody, but they actually mean very different, like different things to different people. And like fucking talk to your partner about those assumptions. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that like one thing in conversations about like polyamory that like still kind of frustrate me sometimes is we still talk about monogamy and polyamory in this like binary way, as if those two things are like opposing frameworks, even though when we like look at the root words, they're not the same words, right? So like, I and whether or not to use polyamorous as an identity is something some people really identify with that as like a part of their orientation, and other people they use it to describe their relationship. But I would say like I'm not. I've always been like every relationship I've ever been in has been non-monogamous, but I'm not polyamorous, right? So I don't even know what words to use for that ever. Um, and in terms of finding resources for that kind of like structure or setup, or how to do that in a way that isn't treating external sexual partners as disposable or like in a fucked up way, I don't even, like there is not good like writing about that, other than people who've had bad experiences talking about their experiences. um
I actually
in terms
do
of
I actually do really like our polyamory and sort of the associated Reddit web. Um, it's not all good or perfect, but I think that the sort of hive mind that, in the way that communities on Reddit sort of have like pretty like they kind of collect into a certain set of ideals that are like I think is generally pretty good. Um,
mhm.
and it's really a really interesting way to learn about poly, because most of that is like our like a lot of what the posts that actually get submitted are like our relationship level what the fuck are you doing bad.
Right.
But that is actually a really interesting way to learn about poly, is be like, here's all the ways not to do it, and here's a bunch of people yelling at people doing it wrong. and, and it helps. But anyway.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, Disco Dear Diary. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning just like how a lot of people talk about non-monogamy is like poly has like become the like default word people used to use, which is interesting because like I remember 10, 12 years ago when we were all Dan Savage pilled, those of us who are old enough to have been Dan Savage pilled, everybody would talk about like being monogamish or open relationships. People wouldn't talk about polyamory. And that was its own whole bucket of toxic assumptions. and pressures that people felt to like have relationships that looked a certain way. And now I think the way that it gets talked about in certain circles is there's really not a lot of space for people who aren't looking for romantic relationships or romantic attachments, or who are aromantic. Uh, and that's also a piece that's kind of missing. But yeah, I feel like learning through other people's experiences, like you were just saying, Maddie, and like just kind of seeing like through like communities and subreddits and things like that, has been, anytime somebody tries to present themselves as having the playbook of how to do these things ethically, it's ends up being kind of a bad time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really great example, Foamy. I cheated, question mark, because I heard my BF say he was cool with me sleeping with others, but not the part where he wanted to be involved in the process. I think that's the biggest thing with poly, and actually I think people are starting to use ethically non ethically non-monogamous or ethical non-monogamy as opposed to poly. And there's also a weird tangent that I don't know enough about where technically
Like, why do you have to call it ethical? Like, you
yeah,
don't call it ethical monogamy. Like, like
right.
that's
There's
that's a
also a
pretty
weird
important
thing
one.
where a lot of people say you're not supposed to say poly because that refers to Polynesian people, in the way that a very similar thing where it's like NB is like non-black and non-binary people. And so I don't, forgive me, I still say poly most of the time. I've never actually heard from a Polynesian person that it matters. Um, so I get that it's
For tagging is where it's mostly a concern. Is like if you're using the
mm,
poly tag and it like erases like
that makes more sense.
polyamorous communities on, let's say, Tumblr, trying to, or Polynesian, I'm sorry, communities trying to find each other on that tag. That's where I've kind of heard it the most.
That makes sense. Yeah, polyam is usually what people use. Um, but anyway,
I did want to share a thread, just because, especially since the concept of like kind of cheating and what does cheating mean and non-monogamy and things like that come up. A Twitter thread from my friend Brianna, who kind of talks about how in both monogamous or non-monogamous relationships, the actual cheating is the not communicating, and not respecting boundaries. It's
mm-hmm.
not what you actually, the behavior, it's the fact that you didn't lead up to that. I'll just drop that in the chat. um she has a lot of really cool thoughts about these kinds of things, um that I just really vibe with.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception is you can cheat in poly, and that doesn't even mean like even in a relationship where like there's a long conversation we could have about like boundaries and what kinds of and veto power and all this other shit, and one penis policies and all of this other stuff. But
Oh Lord, yeah.
yeah, that's a whole thing. But even outside of those kinds of discussions where you're in a relationship where basically it's like, yeah, you can I'm not going to set boundaries of who you can sleep with or when or how you have to talk to me about it. There are ways to cheat. I mean, a really common thing is that I think it's really important for everyone to non-monogamous people and really anyone to have discussions about safe sex, you know, that it like whether you are going to counting penises. One penis policy is where there's a straight guy and a bisexual woman, and the guy is like, you could sleep with other people, but not guys, because, and it's also a transphobic thing where it's like, well, usually they're talking about guys and not trans women, or or trans men or whatever. But it's like, no, I'm too jealous if it would make me too jealous for you to sleep with a man with another man. Uh, one true penis to rule them all. But
One
anyway,
true penis. Yeah. Okay, I linked to the wrong tweet at first. This is the actual tweet. I'll just read it out real fast.
please,
So
yeah,
Brianna said, polyamory thoughts. When you free yourself of the idea that quote unquote people who cheat should be non-monogamous, because you get cheating isn't about desire, but lack of communication and disrespecting a boundary. You can also disabuse yourself of the idea that these things don't happen in non-monogamy.
right, yeah,
Yeah, I just really liked how she phrased that.
yes, I really agree, and it's like people that cheat are usually bad at poly because it takes so much communication and honest communication, and that is the thing that usually people, you know, like if you are somebody who honest is like a serial cheater, like you're not somebody who's gonna care about, you know. But also, you know, a really common thing is if I were to have sex with somebody with without protection in a way that was outside of our agreement, that's cheating. That is cheating. Whether or not I'm allowed to have sex with them, if I have unprotected sex with somebody that we like haven't agreed that is okay with, you know, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, let's regain. I feel like we had a beautiful segue that we're gonna pretend we still are segueing to. Uh,
Oh yes, we have an hour left for the nightcap that is shitting on Jordan Peterson.
or Jesse or Jesse
Or
Singal,
Jesse
right?
Singal, not Jordan Peterson. You know,
Same
same
different.
thing.
Up
Same
yours,
thing.
woke moralists.
And this was, yeah, we're doing all the.
Yeah. But I think also this is definitely a topic we can return back to because I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to say, like
Oh
on a
yeah,
future stream and maybe with a guest about just like there's so much like racism in poly communities. There's
yes.
just so many like so much queer phobia. There's a lot of like weird class intersections where people are just not taking into account, you know, like if you're entering into a relationship and they are an established couple that are married and they have resources and you don't, like how you can't just like hand wave and say we're all equal here and act like that's the case. Like there's just so many different interesting things that people don't always know how to own up to, and talk about, and great things that come from examining these things and having these conversations. So
Yeah, I'd love to do
lots to
a full poly stream. Yep, unicorn hunters is a big thing. So
oh god, yeah.
yeah. So do you want to talk about your personal friendship? No.
Oh yeah, let me pull up the Substack where Jesse Singal talks about me.
Oh, I've
Singal
heard
Substack.
chat. I've heard about this, but I don't know the details. So I'm very excited to get the full tea on this.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to share your screen?
Sure. Yeah, let me do that. If that won't be too onerous for you.
No, sorry. We're gonna have to fuck with this a little bit, but it should be fairly quick. This, do this. Yeah, forgive me, chat. This will take just a second.
Tired. What's your sign? Wired. What did Jesse Singal say about you? Okay, so Chubby Kumquat asked for background, and this is very important because I think anybody who cares about trans issues, it's helpful to be aware of just how much damage Jesse Singal is personally responsible for. Um, he wrote an article for The Atlantic several years ago called When Your Child Says They're Transgender. And in that article, he profiled a bunch of detransitioners. And he did not divulge in that article that all of those detransitioners knew one another and were all part of a trans exclusionary movement, and were political organizers who were specifically setting out to advocate for restriction on transgender healthcare. He just presented it as a profile of a couple of different people who transitioned and regretted it and felt that they didn't get adequate medical care and weren't informed of the risks enough, um, without giving that huge political element to it.
Yeah. So
That article,
was this? Yeah. Where's the timeline here? Is that before or after this?
that was before this, and that article has since been cited by almost every Republican lawmaker, often in the text of the laws that
Wow.
have passed, or proposed bans on youth access to transition related healthcare and also transition related care in general. He also has a reputation for sending hate mobs in people's way. Nicole Clift has been driven off of Twitter because of him. Grace Lavery has been multiple times. Now he's attacking Michael Hobbs of You're Wrong About, though he did just delete his Twitter because Michael Hobbs dunked on him so hard. So that's good.
We love we love Michael Hobbs, and
He's got a T-boy voice and a T-boy heart.
Honorary trans.
Honorary T-boy, Michael Hobbs. So that was all before my personal beef with him. I already was very aware of him as someone who presents research in a bad faith way to say he's just asking questions about who gets access to transition and things like that.
Yeah.
And in particularly, he's kind of infamous for pointing to some of those now pretty widely discredited European studies on like the prevalence of detransition and that we're just using like really shoddy methods. And we're just profiling like a handful of people who had transition regret, which those people's concerns, to be clear, are valid and legitimate things. You know, we stand detransition people who aren't TERFs here.
Yeah.
You know, like that's all worth talking about, but none of that's a reason to get rid of trans people's body autonomy.
Yeah. Detransition care is just trans care. You know, we should have access to changing our gender in any fucking way that we want, no matter who you are. And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's no reason for us to like shy away from detransitioners or to view them as like some nasty secret that needs to be covered up or even something that needs to be rare. You know, like transition is not this linear thing or this binary thing. So some people, you know, go on testosterone for a while and then say, actually, I want to get laser hair removal or, you know, any other combination of things for any other number of reasons. And that's all totally fine.
Yeah.
It's people being TERFs and saying nobody else should transition because now I feel differently about my transition. That are
a full adult was rushed into transition care when that by having to wait years or you know and go to a bunch of therapy was rushing in, and I think people should have been more paternalistic to me.
Right. I, a person who sought out an informed consent clinic instead of a traditional, you know, full psychiatric evaluation clinic, I'm mad that they let me consent to something. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wrote a piece for Slate back in 2019 called The Dysphoria Paradox. And here that is right here. And what I talk about in this article is this weird thing that happens sometimes when you embark on a gender transition, where just by acknowledging that there's somewhere you want to go or something that you want to change, you're paying attention to your dysphoria and legitimizing it on a level that probably you weren't when you were closeted. And so sometimes your dysphoria gets worse at first. And that doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Or that that you know transition is bad for trans people's mental health, right? It's just that like when you finally let yourself acknowledge, oh, I don't want, you know, these things on my chest, suddenly you're really aware of them and it feels very like an emergency, for example.
Yeah.
You know,
Anecdotally, I both myself and pretty much every trans person I have actually been around during transition, it's just how it goes. Like, I don't know, most people are super repressed about a bunch of things, and when you've, you know, repressed something that big that is so culturally scary. I've talked about it took me for me personally, it took MDMA to make me understand that I was trans because I was chemically unable to be afraid of transitioning and that you know, and I was like, oh wow, I could just experience the good parts and not be afraid. And that was the only way I was able to understand that I was trans. And then it took me a fucking year to understand that I was. And there's a bunch of shit I didn't ever notice about how uncomfortable I was with my body. And so yeah, it felt worse than when I could pretend I was fine.
right. Yeah. And there's also weird things that happen where sometimes when one form of dysphoria that you have gets resolved from starting hormones, getting a surgery, presenting in a new way, that thing drops away. And suddenly it's almost like it can feel like dysphoria whack-a-mole, where it's like, well, shit, I dealt with this thing, but now I'm insecure about this thing. Like, and that doesn't mean you're not making progress. It just sucks that these things aren't tidy. And no matter how much you transition personally, you're still living in a transphobic world, and so you still have the social dysphoria of like worrying about how other people perceive you, um, and other people's values. So like it doesn't go away completely ever,
Yeah.
and so that's, I think people have to kind of, it's part of the journey is like resolving or like accepting that, coming to learn that.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't transition. It's just, you know, what's
It's
that Joan Harris line from Mad Men? I'm not a solution to your problem. I'm another problem. But it's, the problem doesn't go away from realizing that it's there. Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's not, and for me personally, I very much was in distress before I realized I was trans. I just didn't realize it. It was
mhm.
like, and then it was like I just felt bad all the time, and I didn't know why. And then I knew what it was, and so that part of it felt worse. And then after the more I align my, physical body and presentation aligned with where I wanted it to be, I just didn't feel as bad.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also why like the conversation about, oh, do you need to have dysphoria to be trans, or like do you have enough dysphoria to be trans, is such a dead end conversation, because
Yeah.
if you're a egg or a closeted trans person, whatever, you have gotten used to living with a lot of discomfort and thinking that that's a life. And same as like I would have thought at the time before I came out, oh, my dysphoria isn't that bad. I don't have to do this. I'm not like those people who really know and really have to. But I was super eating disordered. My health was in a shambles. My relationships were in a shambles. Like there were just things I would just not let myself do in life, as if like there was this future, like I couldn't imagine a future for myself. And so it's like, oh, actually, I was very dysphoric. It's just now I know like there's things I can focus on
Yeah.
instead of just this inchoate suffering.
I wonder why
So
I
that
didn't ever wear shorts in high school. I wonder what that was about. Like, that's a little one, but it's like, uh,
same. I had the same one actually. Yeah.
same hat.
Same hat, same dysphoria. Yeah, just little things like that. So, so I wrote an article about the dysphoria paradox, and I name dropped Jesse Singal and other transphobic fear mongerers in it, and I mentioned him citing some of these detransition, desistance articles in bad faith, and my boy definitely has a Google alert set up for himself, because within like a couple of hours, he was emailing the editor of Slate and myself, like threatening, using slightly legally threatening language about misrepresenting his views and all this shit. Um, Up until very recently, Jesse Singal has been very good at walking this line. Trans people see through it, but cis people would fall for it, of saying
Hmm.
he's just asking questions or just pointing out the data. And there shouldn't be any harm in talking about the data. Why is he being silenced for talking about the data? Um, and this was kind of basically his like tactic here. Um, and so he just goes into like tearing into this article of mine and saying that I misrepresented his viewpoints.
Oh, so Slate took
Uh,
it out? Slate
um,
made your
yeah, it made me
reference?
take out the yeah, they made me take out my reference to him, because they, we both kind of decided like, oh, knowing already his track history, he had already kind of like really fucked with a lot of people up to that point already. So we kind of both just decided like, let's just take out the mention of him. Like it doesn't the main like arc of the article isn't changed if we remove mentioning that he's someone who dabbles in these narratives.
Right, wasn't worth it.
It wasn't worth that fight at that time. Now would I throw hands like on my own medium? Absolutely. But you know, I was tamer then. And then he kind of just goes into how you need to be properly diagnosed in order to be trans, and how this article just really misrepresents, in his view, like what treating dysphoria is supposed to look like.
And also, we will learn why it's so important to him that you get properly diagnosed in his most recent fucking bullshit. It's because
Hmm.
a lot of the people that will diagnose you are actively fucking trying to prevent you from transitioning.
Yes, exactly. Um, and then he again goes into this whole thing about like talking about detransitioners, including the detransitioners that he focused on in his Atlantic article, and how they just have been supposedly overlooked, and there's just this huge problem of people with other mental illnesses, quote unquote, autistics, people with trauma, people with dissociation, etc., who that's their actual problem, quote unquote, is that they're dissociating or they have trauma. They aren't actually trans.
Yeah, Argo Go Bot asks, "What are his qualifications? Sorry, what are his qualifications? Is he just a journalist? I think that's true, right?"
Yeah, he's just a journalist. And interestingly, he wrote a whole book on social psychology. And if I had the time and the money, if it was worth being like a shit like this, I'd done like a play-by-play Twitter thread dunking on his entire book, but I wish I had taken the time to write a whole piece on it, but that ship has kind of sailed. So here's his book.
You can always do a Twitch stream on it.
Yeah, maybe I would. Or maybe this is it. So he has this book called The Quick Fix: Why Fad Psychology Can't Cure Our Social Ills. And a recurring theme in Jesse Singal's work is he dives into social science, not knowing the statistics and not knowing the science enough to be talking about it. So he's also been dunked on by a bunch of like trans statisticians for just completely misinterpreting a lot of the studies on detransition that he talks about. And maybe we can pull that up later. But in this whole book, he talks about a real problem, which is called the replication crisis, which in short is just a lot of psychology studies were so badly designed that no other researcher can reproduce what those researchers found. And they were just really bad research. And a lot of that stuff becomes really popular in just like popular psychology, like a lot of really poorly designed studies. Real problem. Absolutely real problem. It's part of why I don't do research anymore. It's because it's so tainted the field. It's a massive problem. But Jesse Singal kind of diagnoses it as just like, oh, fad psychology, all these liberals talking about implicit bias and it's not even real and like da 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 da. And he doesn't understand that the reason that these bad studies come out is because of it's systemic. It's there's a publish or perish ethos in psychology where if you're not publishing like multiple articles containing dozens of studies a year, you don't have a job. And and a lot of us were trained to use questionable research protocols. And we're told that was the right thing to do. So there's a lot of bad psychologists out there doing bad psychology because we were told, and this includes me, we were trained to do things that are statistically like unsound because it helps you get more publications. It's a labor issue, it's a systemic issue, it's an economic issue, and he just doesn't know any of that because he's not an expert.
Because he doesn't care to find out.
He's just a man on Twitter. So anyway,
So did
uh,
he? The one I don't know a ton about him, but the thing that's been coming up, I saw somebody describe his whole career as writing an article every week and then spending 1,000 hours on Twitter yelling about it and yelling at people about it and shit. Did he do that to you? Like when he wrote this article, like calling you out, did he like yell about you on Twitter?
he sure did. He didn't at me, which is rare. I lucked out. I would have gotten so much more flaming if he had added me, and he did not. So that was very good. Um, but I still did get a lot of people coming for me. But again, because I have no, I just muted the thread and was just like, bye. Like I don't care. I don't give a shit. You only make me more powerful. Um,
Ugh. I mean that yeah, that's
but
why we don't do that. We try to I think people I don't know. I think it's bad to do that as people on the left because there's certainly plenty of people that actually do need to be called out about really terrible shit that they're writing and it's like don't do that because that actually doesn't help. It entrenches their views more and it very likely can increase their clout and it's like You know, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to like do you think that they're gonna like commit suicide or some shit? Because that is literally the only thing you're doing is like abusing people on the internet. Like
Right.
that's not gonna work. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, we just need more of an ethos of don't feed the trolls to come back. Not in a sense of like, oh, just let them say whatever, but like you block them. You report things on platforms where something will happen, but you don't try to argue with these people. But thankfully, Jesse Singal also is very Twitter addicted and ruins his own life on that platform
yeah,
almost as often as he ruins other people's lives. He's also very infamous for sliding into trans women's DMs and making them uncomfortable. So that's cool.
I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, we still don't have any good like real smoking gun screenshots of him saying something overtly sexual or something like that, but a lot of people have just talked about like he's just really persistent in asking trans women for interviews and to meet up with him, and why won't they debate with him, why won't they get lunch with him, why won't they get coffee, why can't we talk about this, and it's really fucking creepy.
Oh my
And
god.
it's particularly trans women that he does that tactic to.
I
So
wonder why.
hmm.
Um okay. So should I switch the screen back to we can talk about the next part of this story, or is there
Yes.
more? Okay.
Yeah, well, one more just piece of background, just for the kind of person he is. After
Yeah.
that Atlantic article came out, he got a lot of criticism from trans people because we saw where this was going. We saw it was going to the genocidal place that it's now at, and he, was a little piss baby about it and how he was being attacked, even though he attacks people in the exact same way all the time.
He
And then
had
Yours
his
woke moralists.
he
moment.
had that moment, and he started a little podcast called Blocked and Reported
Oh my god.
with a Miss Kitty Herzog, who you may also know for writing a very transphobic article for The Stranger, Dan Savage's magazine, where she talked about how there's no butch lesbians anymore because they all became transgenders, and it was a very awful article. And she's an awful person, maybe even worse than him. Um, and so they have a podcast that they do, I think, every week where they just talk about woke moralists and how cool it is to be canceled, and etc.
It's insane the way that people dedicate their lives to hating trans people. It's so like I don't understand it. Like especially people like Glinner, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like he
Yes.
ruined his life. His life is ruined. He was very successful. He was a successful comedy writer, happily married with kids, presumably, and he ruined his life. His wife left him. His kids won't talk to him. He doesn't get any work anymore because, like, even in Britain, where him being a massive transphobic piece of shit is normal and fine, he's so obsessed. No one wants anything to do with him, and all he writes about is how awful trans people are and how we're all misogynistic. It's
Mm-hmm.
wild. It's like, shut up. For your own
Yeah,
good. I'm worried about you.
literally. They're ruining their own lives, and then it's like they've sunk so much cost into it, and then they just take it even further. It's wild.
Yeah. So, um, yeah. The original start of that shit was, hey, this one episode was kind of bad, and I actually saw a screenshot of that very first original discussion, and it was wild because he was actually super reasonable about it. He actually was kind of like, I think that people are being mean to me about this. Like, it was still he should have realized a little bit better. You know, I don't think he apologized for it exactly, but like it wasn't who he is now. Like it was literally like, yeah, I think people are being mean in the way that they're talking about this, but I understand their concern. Like it was something to that thing.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, he wrote one transphobic episode, or maybe more, but like one particularly transphobic episode of the IT crowd, got critiqued for it, and then just was like, oh, I'm gonna ruin my whole life over this.
Yeah. So, one fun thing I learned in doing my so much research I did for this, which was about 5 seconds, um, was I learned he's famous for another thing, and that is apparently his terrible pizzas. Have you seen this? Here, hold
This
on.
is like Carol Oates having that filthy keyboard.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here it should be on Zoom
Master
too.
Wild said, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah. Tonight was the first time I had a full-on architectural disaster. For reasons that are too technical and traumatizing to get into, I basically had to fold this one bit over the other bit just to salvage things. Then I decided to hide my shame with lots and lots of onions. Why you have so many onions?
I don't understand how you could fuck up a pizza this badly. Like,
Yeah. The onions aren't even all cooked the same amount. It looks like, yeah, I don't understand. Is this before or after baking? Because the onions are cooked.
right. What in the goddamn, like, too technical and traumatizing to get into. Were you trying to make a calzone? What?
Yeah. So that is the worst one, but these are also not great. That that
Oh,
looks bad.
that's so ugly.
That's really really gross. And then this horrible thing. That one at least looks like it could taste okay, despite being
Yeah.
awful and ugly. But
Yeah, it's giving party pizza. The
yeah,
$1 party pizza.
yeah. So you he's committed more sins than just transphobia. Um. So yeah, do you should I the reason we are talking about this man is because of his cell phone, his very good cell phone. Let's see if I can find that one thing he tweeted that made uh
Yeah, kind of something to encapsulate the whole saga, but we can do also a quick
I
ish
think that, yeah,
rundown of it.
yeah, this is the this is the tweet that really sums his in his own words. This is what really sums it up. Is I have some dumb questions for a genuine HIPAA expert. If anyone knows one or is and wouldn't mind shooting me an email. And I believe, let's see, when did the article come out? Because I want to say this is actually even after the article came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is oh no, this isn't written by him. But
Oh,
yeah, so I don't really remember exactly how that part all worked out. But this particular article, oh, this is by the whistleblower herself. And this came
right.
out February 9th. And he tweeted that March 23rd. So, yeah. So, basically, Michael Hobbs has a really good thread on this, and I'm going to pretty much read. Uh, so, yeah, last month, a whistleblower came forward with allegations that a St. Louis gender clinic was rushing kids through transition without assessment. Her account included a number of implausible claims. She misrepresented the side effects of medication and said children, quote, routinely transitioned without parental consent. Also said a child identifying as as a helicopter was put on hormones, which is obviously a meme.
Yeah,
Uh,
obviously the kid was joking.
um, yeah, a bunch of people amplified this account. Um, A few weeks later, local outlets reported they had spoken to more than 20 parents of kids treated at the gender clinic. None reported rushed assessments. In all that time, zero parents had come forward to confirm the whistleblower's claims. Because their central claims are not that like parents are rushing kids into this, which is a bullshit thing that they say. It was specifically that the kids are getting rushed into it without even parents' consent, which is a very specific thing that parents would be able to confirm and
Yes.
aren't.
And it later came out that this person is not a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a phlebotomist or a member of the medical staff. They work at the front desk
Yep.
of a clinic, and they just overheard some conversations. So they have no insight into the medical process or even what it's supposed to be.
Yep. Yep.
Who's
So
writing this?
people double down, including Jesse. So I think Jesse's Singal basically had this um like
He then interviewed the person for his Substack,
right.
and was kind of came out like defending them and reporting on them.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out the patient didn't come to the center identifying as a helicopter. The phrase appeared in a referral letter from an outside therapist. Whistleblower knew this because she and another staffer were helping keeping a quote red flag list of patients they believe wrongly received transition care. Bosses at the clinic learned about the list last year and told her to delete it. She refused. Um, I don't know if this but yeah, the person who wrote that referral came out and was like that was among that like I had been seeing this patient for months, and that was one thing they said among many other things. And it was, I think the person who wrote the report even understood it was a joke when they wrote it in there.
Yeah, like the sentence is even this teen identifies as a communist, an anarchist, an attack helicopter, non-binary, somewhat female, da da da. Like they were giving a whole portrait of how this kid identifies when they were
Right.
asked, "How do you identify?" You
Yeah.
know, and so the kid was obviously kind of going for some like transgressive non-binary swag
Yeah,
joke.
and I think, and also I think the way that people joke about their gender is super valid. Like that is a whole different discussion we don't really have time for, but like I think I mean, how many times, how many Tumblr posts have I seen where it's like, "Oh my god, this inanimate object is so gender." And it's like that shit is fucking valid because we don't have the words to describe what it actually is. It's not that I literally think that I am this a robot or whatever, and I don't understand that the differences between myself and this thing. It's just like I don't know how to describe my gender, but I see that inanimate object, and that shit's fucking gender, and it's like that's valid. And clearly, what this person
Yeah.
was communicating is that they're like, I don't fucking know. I'm a communist and I'm an attack helicopter. I don't fucking know, which is valid.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say you're an attack helicopter specifically, because that is such a meme and a joke, like that comes with a particular meaning of like this transgressive, like,
Right,
fuck what these other people think about me. I identify with whatever, fuck your binary. Like, that's a very strong point of view, you know, even if you're going by like the W path transition standards, that's like very like consistent, persistent, whatever, you know,
right.
like assertion of gender. Like, but, you
and
know,
and again, this whole thing predicates on this person was rushed into transition, into rushed to medication, when the thing that she even heard this reference from was a referral from a person who saw them for months. Like
right. Yeah, and just to like be exceedingly clear, you know, here in the US, we have informed consent, at least for adults, where you can get hormones the same day,
right,
if you know, barring like certain exceptions. And this person was not a member of the medical team. They have no psychiatric training. They have no medical training. They and another staffer, so what somebody working in a non-medical capacity, decided that they didn't believe a lot of these young trans people that they saw coming in based on nothing, no expertise, just their own prejudices. And they hated seeing these kids get to transition so much that they created a spreadsheet with patient details
including
outlining
names.
every, including names. All of this is a huge violation of healthcare privacy laws in the US. A list of the people they thought were going to detransition one day. It's like if like ER nurses were betting on which patients were going to die that came in the ER.
Yeah.
It's totally inappropriate. It's totally not their lane. It's
It,
playing with people's lives on a level that if you have even the impulse to do that, you should not be working in healthcare. It's awful.
it would have been immoral if they just had it and didn't show it to anyone, and immoral, and I'm fairly sure illegal. But
Mm-hmm.
it went farther than that because they shared it with other people. I think when they shared the list, the names had been removed, but they were removed in a way that you could get them back. I don't understand cybersecurity well enough to understand exactly how it was, but it was like it was able to be unredacted.
Right. And as Reembody just said in the chat, even if you're a receptionist at a healthcare clinic, you undergo HIPAA training. I mean, I had to go under HIPAA training when I like volunteered for like a phone line once, like for like lonely kids, you know, like you get HIPAA training if you do anything that touches anybody's health.
If you're
Like,
most of the time, if you're a patient, they fucking explain that shit. Like, have you not
yeah.
been a patient at a doctor at an office and somebody hasn't been like, yeah, we're not allowed to do these things. Like, like how every single medical place gives you a thing. You don't have to read it, but there's a thing they give you that is like, I understand HIPAA, like just to be a fucking patient, not let alone a practicing medical staff.
Right. And when you are working in medical staff, there are really tight HIPAA laws about even which healthcare information you get to look at. You
Yeah.
can't just pull up somebody's chart unless there's a reason for it. So even by like pulling this information, that was a violation of HIPAA. Like this person has violated HIPAA like 5 different ways.
Yep.
They are fucked. And a lot of these details only came to light because Jesse Singal posted about it. So he put
Um.
his source in danger, which is also bad journalism.
Yeah. So I think and that was what I was trying to because people are also implying that because I guess he viewed this information. So I don't think he shared it. Maybe he did share screenshots of the actual list. Yeah, because it looks
Oh
like they
yeah.
fucking like you can see right here. This is like literally just a screenshot of the unredacted list that they've put black over, which is like
A lot of
unredacted.
times you can get rid of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, a lot of people are saying that he is also liable for this HIPAA violation because of his involvement in it, which is like, oh, yummy, yummy, feed it to me like grapes. We can fucking hope.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah, and he like this source, he got in close with this person. I think Jamie Reed is her name, is and because he positioned himself as I'm going to defend this whistleblower, and then he just completely fucked up so badly by revealing so much about this person's fucked up process that like he's the reason this person's going to be in the legal shithole on the level that they are going to be,
Yeah. And
which
and
is
and
great.
and as Michael Hobbs points out, it's all to win a little Twitter beef because he was like defending this woman on Twitter. Like, it's not even about the article, it's about his fucking Twitter beef. Oh, it's
Yes. And so Jesse Singal, tweeted, "Is anybody a lawyer? I'm dying."
Ah.
And then a few days later said, "I'm actually gonna." He's like locked down his Twitter before plenty of times, but he's like, "I'm gonna actually like deactivate my Twitter and delete all my old tweets," which he's never done that before. So he's running scared. Um, and kind of said, "I have this horrible, stupid addiction in my life that I need to get rid of."
Oh, really? He said that. I missed that the actual. Oh God. If he has some self-reflection, I'm sure eventually he'll blame it on trans people. Um
Oh, for sure.
yeah, oh, and so as more context, just if somehow there's someone watching who is maybe somehow has some amount of uh belief for of Jesse Singal's account. Um, there's this woman, Jennifer Harris Dwalt. I was asked to share my story about Jamie Reed. Did you hear this, Devin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He also like tried to like attack this woman for saying that she was sharing false like accusations against him when really all this person did was just retweet another completely different thing from that same person. And he just didn't even bother to look at what the tweet was that she retweeted. Like,
So, so yeah, basically, not. I don't need to read this whole thing. Basically, this is a parent at this clinic. She had a 6-year-old who came. Her 6-year-old child came to them with basically saying, I have dysphoria of some kind. She was trying to get help. She was not trying to get medication. She was simply trying to get uh, res- uh, resources, including therapists. And I was told I'd receive an email with resources, including therapists, but at my child's age, 6 at that point, no therapist would really see her unless she was at risk of self harm. Um, she also told me that the clinic would not see set up until puberty started. At that point, I was really calling for resources anyway, so this seemed reasonable. Um, but basically, she's like, I never got any. I'm never getting any of these resources. Um, and then so she called. Then the article came out, and she was like, "Oh, that's the fucking person I talked to at the clinic." And so she went back to the clinic, and they were like, "Of course we do educational appointments for kids before puberty, and of course therapists for kids that age. Like, of course we do all this shit." And she had literally just been like, "Nope, your kid's too young to know. I don't believe you."
Oh my
So,
God.
fuck
Okay, I'm
off.
sorry. I did not see this thread. Wow, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting this. Whoa.
Yeah, so this is clearly the work that she had been doing, is not only passive but active suppression and gatekeeping of trans care as a non-medical professional who was not even getting the whole, like, this is so fucked up on a lot of levels.
Oof.
And this is what trans people have to deal with. Like, this is not only what trans people have to deal with. This is what every minority has to deal with when they fucking try to get help through the medical establishment. Like, this is why, this is one of the many reasons why, we do not, I don't, fuck a diagnosis. Like,
Right.
fuck a doctor. Like, this is the people you have to deal with. And and this is a white, presumably somewhat affluent woman, if she has time and space to try to get help like this. Like, I don't know who this person is, but like, presumably there's some amount of that. And so imagine this woman being black. Imagine this woman, it's all fucked.
Yeah, this is a kid who had a supportive parent,
Yeah.
like, and they
Yeah.
still didn't, and a persistent and aware enough one to keep doing this, which, like, even parents who are kind of like blandly well-intentioned but don't know much would totally fall through the cracks in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who follow Philosophy Tube, you will have seen that, like, her most recent video was about trans healthcare in the UK. And she tells this story about how, there's a lot more gatekeeping in the UK than the US to get trans healthcare through the National Health Service. And she went to a doctor to get a referral to a gender clinic, which is what you have to do. And her doctor, her just GP, was like, "Oh, I don't think I can do that. I don't know. You need to come back in 18 weeks, like, to make sure you're sure." And like all of these gatekeeping procedures that are not NHS policy. It was just this doctor was transphobic and didn't want to get her medical care. And so she
Yep.
just said, "Oh, I don't know how to do that." Or, "Oh, you need to wait. There's a longer wait." And then just didn't do anything. Um, and her whole video goes into it a lot deeper about, like, the more gatekeeping procedures you put in place, the more discretion you're giving to just random ass people who decide they want to be transphobic. And that's not protecting anyone. Um, and it's still a problem even here where we have informed consent, where there is a lot less of that
Yeah.
gatekeeping.
Yeah. Because that all happened in the U.S., right? The
Um,
Jesse Singal, or was that?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All this stuff that Jesse Singal writes about in all these clinics, these are in the U.S. But Philosophy Tube is in the NHS.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I was trying. I forgive me for secondhand shit that um I'm not gonna remember. I thought I saved it, but I didn't. I was reading about this art. I want to say it was in Australia, where there was a gender clinic that existed for years and did not, like, it was expressly created as a place for trans people to go and get care and get hormones, and they have never prescribed hormones in their entire life, or in the entire history of that clinic. Every single
Wow.
time the doctors that were there said that they didn't feel comfortable prescribing in this case. And
So it's
so,
literally like one of those crisis pregnancy centers that,
yeah,
like, takes people who want abortions and, like, scolds them
yeah,
into
and
not doing it.
yeah, and that is the same. That's also the case in the UK. I've seen all of those pictures of people in the UK going to the gender clinic that they've been waiting to get into for 5 years, and it's an empty office. It's like, that is like the story where it's just like, it's not waiting for years. Yeah, there's a clinic in the UK serving a whole region that sees less than 10 patients a year. Yep. And that's the whole story in the UK, is from what I've heard outside of that as well. Like, they just, yeah. Yeah.
There's a
See an endo if you can, but
Luckily, again, DIY HRT is legal in many countries, especially for trans femme people, including the UK. So know your options.
Yeah, and if you're a trans man and know any bodybuilders,
Find a bodybuilder. Yeah, or bodybuilder forums.
a new type of therapy associated with those clinics. I forget what it's called, but it has a progressive sounding name, but it's just conversion therapy essentially. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God. I would know the name. I would recognize it if I saw it, but I know what you're
Sorry.
talking about, Trans Peaks.
Yeah. So many of those doctors come into it with the idea that they are trying to have as few people transition as possible. Like that is the goal.
Mm-hmm. And the ableism is really baked into it, this idea that like you need to have a differential diagnosis. If you're autistic, you can't be trans. If you, again, dissociate, you can't be trans. Those are some of the big ones. Trauma, which find a trans person, a closeted trans person who doesn't have trauma. Like,
Yeah.
good luck. Yeah. So,
Anyway, we love you guys.
yes.
All this shit sucks, but Jesse Singal had to delete his Twitter account because he fucked up so bad. So
It's so beyond time for this man to at least suffer. And so I'm very glad to see that happening to him. He's been upset. Yes, that's a spicy meatball.
feed it to me like grapes.
Yes. And I hope we get to the point where publications will stop publishing him, if not because of the transphobia, which should have been reason enough, but because he is a walking landmine of lawsuits and journalistic integrity failures, um, even of the most like bland, normie liberal standards.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or comments outside of what we've already caught? And then we're kind of running towards the end, so I think we should do something to take our minds off this.
mm-hmm. Ooh. Oh, do you have a freak for us?
Well, I haven't chosen one.
Okay.
But I have my list.
Oh,
I can pull up. There was the other thing we had talked about, but I think we should save that. We talked about because I don't think we have time to go but we did see that tweet from the BBC. Here, I'll just bring it up because it was.
Yeah, this was also choice.
Mental health crisis from pandemic was minimal, study suggests. And then there's a billion really good quote tweets. So I feel like I want more time than we have to go over that. So if anybody saw any really amazing quote retweets from that, let us know. And maybe
the King's Hand is probably the God tier one.
Yeah, let's do that one at least. Let's do that one at least.
But it's just a whole thread of people just sharing their most unhinged pandemic projects or weird things they believed or bought. So highly recommend checking the quote tweets out on that in general.
I scroll all the way. Oh, there's so many. I thought I would be able to find it, but
gender exploratory therapy. Thank you, Trans Peaks. Yes. Yeah. You'll also see detrans turfs and therapists like this, because there are therapists who are into this, talking about like alternative treatments for gender dysphoria. That's also a red flag and a conversion therapy tactic.
So yeah, this is the really good one. I had a dream where there was a food called King's Hand, a hollow hand made of M&M cookie filled with Greek salad. I could not stop thinking about it. Here's the culmination of a week-long effort. Oh my god, wait a minute. No, this is lies. This happened on December 6th, 2020.
Well, this person posted it then a link to this tweet as their reply to the quote tweet.
Yeah, but like the pandemic hadn't started in 2020 or in December.
Yeah, it started in March.
Oh right, I'm thinking January. Don't ignore I'm so stupid about I don't know my months. It's like January 2020. It hadn't happened yet. No, it's fucking December. I know how to count.
Man. Yeah,
Jesus Christ. Anyway.
this person had a few months to really think about things, and yeah, time is very confusing at this point for sure.
But yeah, so there was a bunch of stuff like this. So maybe we'll come back to that because there's just so many in there. So if you have any good ones from that tweet or want to tell us the way that your mental health became memes because of how bad it was.
Absolutely. What was your king's hand, basically?
Yeah. Hit us up in the ask box. And also, again, I will remind everybody, next Friday, we are going to be talking about getting a therapist. And the ways in which that's hard, and the way how to grill a therapist your first session, how to see what like read their information online to see if they seem like they might line up with you. So please send us questions and asks for that next week.
Yes. And I might make a little short PowerPoint just for fun.
Ooh, we definitely have to set up our video ninja thing so it'll be in the highest possible quality.
Oh, yes. The date on that is Friday, the March 24th at 1 CST, 2 EST.
Yeah. And then also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my Twitch. I am starting to stream more, and I'm very close to being getting affiliate. So
Yes.
And stick around after this stream because we're gonna raid me, and I'm gonna play with this stupid thing, and then maybe play some more. Oh, that's a bad one. Also, maybe play some more Sons of the Forest, which was really fun. All right.
The emoji, yes. Not like this.
Did we do tufted ground squirrel? I don't think we did.
I think we did. I think we did do that one.
Did we? Did I just forget some?
I thought that was like a squirrel with a nose.
Does this look familiar?
Oh, maybe not. Maybe not.
Very good spoony emoji in there. So this comes from Kylo's breeding kink, which is a really good. Yep. Tufted ground squirrel, IUCN, vulnerable to extinction and endemic to island of Borneo and Kalimantan, has the largest tail to body size ratio of any mammal, with the tail being 130% of its body. I just think everyone should see it. And I agree. Look at that fucking guy.
This is like the hot duck.
Oh yeah, was that in Chicago? The duck everybody was so horny
No,
for?
Central Park. The Central Park hot duck.
Very good. So that was tufted ground squirrel.
Beautiful. Markings are so. That's such an elegant squirrel.
No, that's the normal squirrel. What do you mean? Let me resize my shit so you can see.
Yeah, good luck
everything.
Googling the hot duck chubby kumquat. We'll turn safe search off for that.
Okay. That's a normal squirrel.
Yeah, I mean, a beauty in its own right, and certainly a freak.
Very
I once
good.
saw oh, there we go.
Go on.
Oh, I once saw a squirrel carrying a whole other squirrel up a tree that was still alive but did not look well.
Oh.
And I googled squirrel carrying another squirrel to see if maybe he was his friend and was helping him. He was not his friend. He was not helping.
Oh no. Wait, sorry, vampire squirrel? What? I think we could probably listen to have this audio. What is this Bushnell logo? Why is that there? Okay, so that's just lies. I got clickbaited.
Oh, they think the squirrel looks like a vampire?
No, it was saying that they. Oh, can you not see this? Sorry, let me. Can you see my screen right now, Devin?
I'm just oh sorry, I'm just looking at the Twitch.
Oh yeah,
It's like
you
oh,
should
okay.
be able to see it, but the Twitch you should also be able to see it, just delayed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was saying that people believe that it drinks the blood of like deer and stuff, but that scientists don't think that that's likely. I should have it set up so you can see it through the Zoom window too. I'm not sure if it's.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is. It's just our heads cut off some of the video, so I couldn't read the
Oh,
text.
it's a really cute little guy. That is distinctly not on the ground.
Mm.
So kind of a lie there.
Yeah.
Try eat 621 if you have trouble finding what you're looking for. Don't. I mean, if anyone wants to try that, you'll have fun, but it won't be
It's
safe
dangerous
for
to go alone. Take this. Take Yif.
It's gonna be a lot of furry porn, just so you know.
Yes.
Okay, let's come on. Oh, that's a good. Look at his. If you'll stop shaking.
Yeah. All the footage of this squirrel is like very unstable. That must be its power.
Yeah, it's got the Bigfoot power that it's just naturally blurry. I would love like a headband that had ears like that.
Oh, wouldn't that be darling? Oh yeah. I think that can be arranged. I think we could find people.
And then but then I'd also have to have a tail that is 130% of my body, which would be as a large woman would be massive. Would not fit in
Listen,
the convention door.
that's the larger the woman, then the larger the tail, and that is good. So that I think that needs to be arranged. That would be very heavy, but
Yeah, somebody do the math on that. How big would it have to be? I don't know what this person says 130% size of the body. I'm 6'2". How big would it have to be? Somebody do the math. Because I refuse. Damn, there's not a lot of video of these little guys.
oh, look at its dainty little prances.
Oh, it's so good.
Wow. Oh, charming. Wow.
This fucking that fucking
Oh my
just the
god.
oh
Yes.
my god.
Vampire squirrel that hunts deer. And the deer looks so scared.
Well,
Like so freaked out.
it sounds like an urban legend, but if anyone wants to incorporate this into your furry role play,
Yes, a new mythical being.
you need an 8 foot 8 inch tail as a 6'8" woman. God, just
Wow.
imagining how bushy, because the tail is probably really thin and it's just bush. Oh
Also, re-embodied, you're 6'8"?
yeah, we're all really
Very
excited about
powerful.
that. Powerful.
We really respect that a lot.
We do. Rip shoe shopping though. I'm sure.
Mm.
I have enough trouble at 6'2". 4 inch heels
I've got
just so that I could get to be a 7 foot tall woman. Oh, I don't have any tall heels and I need them. I need them.
that's so powerful. 7 foot tall. Gosh. Have you done a cosplay of the Resident Evil woman?
Lady Dimitrescu.
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna start wrapping up. I I want everyone to prayer hands in the chat because
We're about to do a handoff here that's pretty tricky, I would imagine, on your end.
I have no idea. I did kind of I think I tried it for a second to see if it would work. And it should be really easy. But I am going to attempt to stream both to this current channel and my own channel simultaneously so that we can actually raid.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I'll vamp because trying to talk while you're trying to do both of those things, I would imagine would be impossible.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the vamping.
Yes, of course. I'll drop a link in the chat for anybody else who is curious about the hot duck. So we can all kind of just privately look at that while we're waiting. Central Park hot duck. It's the species is a mandarin duck. Oh my god! Every time I look at him, he's even more beautiful. It's from a piece in New York Magazine's The Cut called "Everybody Loves the Hot Duck."
That needs
And
to
this
be a
is not.
song.
Yeah, that would be a good like pop punk or something. Everybody loves the hot duck. I don't know if he's freak of the week material though, because he's not freaky. He's just pretty and in a very conventional way.
I think that's fine.
Yeah. Not everybody can be a freak.
Okay.
Oh, and
Start streaming?
okay.
Okay. I should be streaming on my other channel.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. I don't see it in my followed channels yet, but let me just refresh for a second here.
While we're
Yes, okay. Yes, you are live playing
right.
Sons of the Forest.
Oh yeah, I didn't
All
change it, but that is probably
right.
what we'll do. So we'll give that a second. We'll start the raid.
Hopefully you have raid turned on. I think that's default. Oh yeah, I don't see you. You might have to
Oh
go
no.
into your settings on your dashboard
Is
to
that a
allow
thing?
raiding.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's so that people can't like hate mob people. So it's a great, feature to
There.
have turning rating off. But yeah.
Channel.
Oh yeah, thank you for being here, everyone, and hopefully some of y'all can stick around for the gaming and the shit posting. This was a really good chat. Like it like even though we covered a lot of different subjects, it felt very like contained and yet also expansive. So
Yeah. Allow raids from channels that meet the following requirements. Yeah, I should be able to raid.
see test device
Raid
underscore.
channel.
Okay, it looks like now it'll let me. Okay, sweet. Start raid. 90 seconds.
Yeah, this was really fun. I get nervous when we don't have a dumb thing to lighten the mood, but I feel like this was extremely fun. So let us know if
Yeah.
you like this.
Yeah, this was good. And as always, the chat, you guys are goated. Like, thank you for like sharing links with each other and answering each other's questions if somebody was wanting to get caught up. Like, and for just enriching the actual conversation. It's like just really great. You
I
guys
don't
just
think
make it
either of us would want to do
excellent.
this if you guys weren't so cool. Like,
Oh yeah,
this would have been a fun experiment that I would be happy to leave behind. But you guys are all so fucking cool.
yeah. And I'm a hater, so like.
Yeah, Devin really is.
Yeah. Prayers out to Singal to get his ass beaten into the dust by HIPAA. Every now and then, as an anarchist and an abolitionist, I do want somebody to catch the law's hands if we're gonna have it.
Mm-hmm. If anybody should get their shit fucked, it's him.
Yes. Also, these dolphin emojis that you have re-embodied are amazing.
Really good, yeah. Okay, I think this is pretty much it. Thank you,
All
everybody.
right.
See you on the other
ya.
side.
See you next week.
Okay, cool. I think we've rated, and I'm gonna jump over there.
All right. I'll see you there.
Okay. Bye.